Well, hello everyone. My name is Sathya Atal, and I'm an incoming medical student to Queen's University. Today we're going to be hosting this event. It's just a pre-med seminar where we're going to have a few medical students and graduates, including myself and a few others from Med Games. We're going to go over our own personal journeys and some stuff about Med Games and the programs that we run as well. So we're going to be starting right away, just because we want to be on schedule. We're going to be starting with a brief talk by Dr. Lakindu Somawira, who has taught for us before and has recently graduated from McMaster University. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Did you want me to share screen and then, or are you gonna?
I can sort of do it here. So
Oh no, it's okay. I can do it. I can do it. I have it open.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
perfect.
perfect.
Amazing. Okay, can you see that? Loading, it says. Okay, perfect.
Well, I'll stop sharing mine.
Sure. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see yours.
Okay, perfect. All right, hi everyone. I'm just going to be giving a quick talk on sort of the basics of the MCAT and things to keep in mind, common tips and tricks. Just before that, my name is Lakindu. I am a graduate from the medical school at McMaster. Before that, I did my undergrad at U of T in life sciences. Now I just started my internal medicine residency at Queen's University, so that's going pretty well. I did my MCAT a while ago, I think 2019, 2020, 2020. And I've been an MCAT tutor since then for Med Games, tutoring specifically for chemistry and physics. So that's been going really well. I've enjoyed my time tutoring a lot. I think the small class sizes really help, build a connection with my students. Yeah, I've gotten really good feedback from students over time. Oh, I think someone's unmuted. Hopefully they can mute themselves. Okay, perfect. If you ever want to reach out about anything med school related, MCAT related, I put my contacts up there if you want to just grab a picture or write it down. Yeah, happy to chat about anything at all. Okay, so let's dive into it. So the first thing before you even attempt to take the MCAT is figuring out sort of what is the MCAT, right? So overall, the MCAT is the exam that you have to take to, for those of you joining, please mute yourselves so you can not be distracted. Okay. So before you take the MCAT, you should know what's on the MCAT. And so for those of you that don't know, the MCAT is the exam that you have to take for entering medical schools, both in Canada as well as America, if you're interested in applying to American schools. It consists of 4 sections. The first being chemistry physics, and then CARS, which is kind of like a critical reasoning English kind of section, reading comprehension. The third section is biology and biochemistry, and then the last section is psychology and sociology. So each of those sections will take up roughly an hour and a half, with either 53 or 59 questions per section. You'll have a little break between the first 2 sections, and then there'll be a lunch break between the second and the third, and then another like 10-minute break between the third and the fourth. So overall, it's quite a long exam. I think it's around 7 to 7.5 hours, depending on how quickly you get through it. So it definitely is a test of stamina, that you want to sort of build that stamina as you do your practice. Yeah, so where do you find out the most up-to-date information? Go on the MCAT website by the AAMC, and they'll have sort of a document, which we've QR coded here so you can easily access it, to see sort of what topics specifically are tested for each section, and where you should sort of put your efforts in when studying. So yeah, definitely read this document from start to finish before you start studying. Okay, so when should you take the MCAT? So most of you are probably in undergrad still. which is perfect. This presentation is great for you. Students, I think, typically write their MCAT after either their second or third year of undergrad. And this is pretty optimal timing, given that most pre-meds are in some sort of science major, and you'll have to take those mandatory courses, such as chemistry, bio, physics, psychology, maybe, and organic chemistry. And so because you've taken those courses in the first 2 years of your undergrad, the basic courses, you're able to have a lot of that information already fresh in your mind. And so when you're studying for the MCAT after your second year, you'll have a lot of that memory already there. So you don't have to relearn everything. Versus taking the MCAT a little bit later in your career, you might have to go back and remind yourself about quantum physics if you didn't take that in a while. And so that's sort of my advice in terms of when you should take the MCAT. Yeah, so it's offered between January and September of each year. There's multiple dates, which we can talk about on the next slide. And given that most people have like sort of free time in the summer, you can use that free time to study for your MCAT. How fun. And so most people, I would say, write it either in July or August, before sort of the application cycle for medical school starts in October. Yeah, so how long do you actually have to study for the MCAT? This obviously depends on how much studying you've sort of done in your undergrad from those basic courses. So for example, I went to U of T Life Sciences. Anyone who's from U of T Life Sciences knows that it's sort of the boonies. There's a lot of content that they sort of throw at you in the first 2 years. So, I took 2 organic chemistry courses in those first 2 years, 2 physics courses. So I had a lot of that knowledge already in my head. And so studying for the MCAT after my second year was really ideal for me, given that I had just, done those biochemistry, physics, organic chemistry courses, and I didn't have to spend. Oh, sorry, Kushali, could you just mute your perfect? I didn't have to spend more time restudying that. So if you're in a similar position, for a timeline, I studied for around 10 weeks during that summer after my second year. But people can study anywhere from 2 months to 4 months. I've seen people do it in 5 weeks. I've seen people do it in 5 months. And so it's really up to you based on how much background knowledge you have and how much time you're willing to commit to studying. On average, if you're looking for an hour number, I would say roughly 200 to 300 hours. Yeah, that's sort of typically how long people study, which comes out to roughly like 3 months. Obviously, take all this with a grain of salt. Everyone's at a different sort of stage in their careers, in their courses. They might be not taking a science major, and so you might need a little bit more time. And my biggest advice is to try to do the MCAT properly the first time, so that you can, get it out of the way and not have to think about it ever again. Definitely is one of the harder exams that I've taken. It's sort of mentally taxing because of the pressure that's associated with like doing well on the MCAT in order to get into medical school. So I think more than the content itself, it really is that sort of mental load that takes a strain while you're studying for it over and over again. So, take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush towards a specific date. If you feel like you're not ready to take it that summer, just push it towards the fall or the winter or even the next summer. And don't rush into it because that'll mean you might have to take it again. And that is not ideal in terms of the time that you spent studying for it, right? So, yeah, there's no timeline. Go at your own pace. Okay. Perfect. So when exactly can you take it? So if you go on the AMC website again, they'll have a list of all the dates that you can take. As you can see on this little infographic here, you can see that the summer has a lot more dates than in the spring and winter. And so typically that's when most people write it. So there's more dates available for you there. If you do end up like feeling that you're not ready to take it for the scheduled date that you had, you can always sort of postpone it. There are sort of timelines in terms of when you can postpone it for free versus when you can postpone it for a cost. So ensure that you sort of look at those timelines so you know that when is the earliest date that I can push it without having to pay a fee. like a cancellation fee. So just look into that when you book your date. I would say mid-August is when people usually take it. Another thing to consider is if you're planning to apply to um, medical school in the upcoming cycle. So if you're applying to Canadian schools, um, at least in Ontario, which is where only I applied, so I can't speak for outside of province, the application's due in October, and so you want to take it before a certain date in August so that your results will come back so that you can submit it to the application system. And if you go on the OMSAS website or whatever website you're using for your medical school application, depending on your province, you can see those specific dates when you have to complete your MCAT by in order to apply for that cycle. So that's another piece of information that you should look into before booking your date. Someone asked, why do you suggest pushing your MCAT to the next summer/winter if you don't feel ready currently? Is there a limit for how many times you can write the MCAT? That's a good question. I'm not sure if there's a limit. There might be, but it's some crazy number like 7 or something. And I don't think anyone's really writing the MCAT 7 times. So you don't really have to worry about that. I would just suggest pushing it because one, it's very expensive. So if you are able to postpone it, you don't have to pay another $400, which is not accessible to a lot of people. And two, you could write it even if you don't feel ready, just to sort of get the experience of what it's like. However, that would sort of, be another mental load that you have to take. I would suggest, maybe taking a break.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Hi, Marie, could you just mute yourself? Thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So yeah, you don't want to, take that mental load. You want to just take your time, learning it properly, getting better practice scores, and feeling confident when you go into your exam. I think that would be sort of my biggest tip in pushing the test date. And it is a very common thing people do. It's not uncommon for people to postpone their date based on them not feeling super ready. Great. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. So yeah, I've been working with MedGains for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, my time with them has come to an end, given that residency has been working like 70 hours a week. So it's kind of brutal. So I no longer have too much time to dedicate to MCAT tutoring, but they do have 2 programs available. One is the summer MCAT program that runs from May to August. If you're looking for a sort of short, very dedicated time to learn about all the content and do some practice questions and practice exams through May to August. But if you're looking for a more longer timeline in terms of studying for next summer, there is a longitudinal MCAT program available from October to April. And so, yeah, pretty much any month throughout the year, there is a program offered by MedGames. And having worked at MedGames for 2 years, I've really come to appreciate some of the biggest pros that this course has compared to some of the other courses that I've seen in my time at undergrad. So you've probably heard of the big ones like Princeton and Kaplan Review, which tend to have large class sizes, which is one of the biggest cons, I would say. Typically, when I've taught, my chemistry physics lessons for this company, we typically have like 10 to 20 people maybe in our class. And so it's really a great little small knit community that everyone's no one's afraid to ask questions or feel like they don't know something. And I know a lot of my students, have their own sort of group chats outside of my class, and they're able to discuss with one another, make study groups, that kind of thing. So it's a very collegial aspect in that regard, which really helps stay motivated to studying for this hell of an exam throughout many, many months. So it's one of the bigger benefits of this program. Is also everything is recorded, which is really nice. So even if you miss a lesson or you feel like you didn't understand something the first time, you're able to go back and access those anytime you want. There's very flexible scheduling in terms of which classes you want to show up for, which questions you want to do. And I believe that the sort of administrative people in the company are able to connect you with individual mentors, so either medical students or other tutors who are able to sort of oversee your study schedule and make sure that you're on track, and be there to sort of answer any questions that you have along the way. So that's another great resource that's provided. And compared to some of those bigger companies, it's definitely way cheaper, and it is sort of more accessible to a lot of people who may not have the resources to pay for a course like that. And yeah, they're taught by Canadian med students. So I've met some of the other tutors and they're all really, really great people. Yeah, couldn't recommend any more. If you're sort of considering whether you should take a course, this is just some personal advice that I would give you. I personally did not take a course, given that I'm pretty neurotic and I tend to have a very sort of sometimes over scheduling myself for things. So I made like this crazy like Excel sheet with a day-to-day schedule, and that worked for me. If you find that you need sort of a little bit more structure when it comes to your studying and you need a bit more guidance, I think a course would be a really, really good option for you. And for example, if you have been sort of out of touch with those basic science topics for many years, I think it would be really nice to have some tutors who are sort of experts in those topics to be able to guide sort of what exactly are the high yield topics when it comes to the MCAT. I think what a lot of people struggle with the MCAT is trying to study everything. The problem with the MCAT is they don't really specifically tell you a lot of the content that is tested. So obviously they'll have a topic saying like, oh, atomic nucleus, but you won't know exactly what type of questions that they're going to ask you until you do the practice, right? So it's nice to have people who've done the MCAT be able to guide you in that sense and tell you sort of what are the highest yield topics that they've seen and that they recommend you study. So yeah, so if you're looking for that sort of discipline, some guidance, I think doing an MCAT course would be for you. However, if you feel like, you're fresh out of second year, you remember a lot of the stuff, you're able to sort of keep yourself on schedule and make your own self-directed schedule, that's totally up to you. Maybe the course is not the best way for you. So, do some self-reflecting and figure out what works for you. So how do you exactly study for the MCAT? This is like everyone's question, right? So what resources do you use? I can tell you briefly how I study. So I spend 10 weeks of dedicated time. When you're studying for the MCAT, obviously people have other commitments. I was working, I think, 2 jobs, which was not the best for studying for the MCAT, but these bills don't pay themselves. So I had to do that summer. So yeah, like definitely sit down and think like, okay, how many extracurriculars am I doing? Am I working as well on top of the MCAT? Like how many hours per day can I actually dedicate to the MCAT? And so for the first 5 weeks, I did a lot of content review. So reviewing the topics, reading some textbooks, going back through my undergrad notes and, refreshing some of these topics in my head. And then the last 5 weeks, I did a lot of practice exams. And so that's where these resources can come really handy. And so the gold standard resource that you must use if you're able to buy them is the AAMC full-length practice exams. These are, I think there's 5 total. One of them is completely free, which is great. So definitely do that one. They are full-length exams, so they're 7.5 hours, and you get to see exactly what type of questions the AAMC will ask you on the MCAT. The problem with third-party resources is no one really knows what style of questions are being asked by the actual people writing the exam. And so taking the AAMC full lengths is the best way to see what exactly type of questions and passages that you're going to see on the MCAT. So if you're going to use anything, use these, okay? That's my biggest piece of advice. Other resources that you can use, I think UWorld would be the next best resource that I've seen. I personally didn't buy UWorld when I was studying because I was too broke, but if you're able to pay for it, it has really, really good explanations, which I've seen in my time tutoring for med games. So there are like weekly UWorld passages assigned to students, and we take up some of the questions during each lesson. And so I've seen that UWorld really takes its time to delve deep into the explanations of why a certain answer is correct. and more importantly, why the other answers are incorrect. So they will give you a very detailed explanation for each of the answer options, which really helps you like with your like reasoning as to which answer should I pick and which answer should I rule out right away. Yeah, so other things which are not as good, but still usable if you have the time. Khan Academy has great videos which cover pretty much all the topics of the MCAT, except maybe cars, because that's not really like a topic-based section. Yeah, so if you're looking for like sort of a free resource for knowledge, Khan Academy is great. I used it when I was studying. Jack Weston is a website that has a free daily cars passage. So cars was personally my weakest section. So doing like those passages every day offered by Jack Weston was a really good way to practice my reading skills and comprehension, and trying to sort of weave through the crazy sort of answers that cars passages will have. So you'll know if you've studied cars already, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you'll see. Cars is sort of the bane of most people's existence. Other free exams that you can get, these are obviously third-party exams, so again, they're not as good, but if you want to practice your stamina, like sitting down, writing an exam for 7.5 hours, you can get some free exams from Blueprint. I think they're called Next Step now. And if you go on Reddit, like you'll be able to find some Reddit post with some code that some great kind soul has posted for you to access some tests for free. So you didn't hear that from me. Okay, I've linked here, hopefully they'll send these slides out to you guys. I have like this doc with some resources that I've compiled over the years, and MedGames has also made their own doc as well, so feel free to check out those resources to see some links and some slides that you can use when you're studying. Okay. Great. So some common mistakes that people make on the MCAT, not taking rest days. So this is really important. When I was studying once a week, I would have a day where I didn't do anything. So I would sleep some more, I would eat snacks, I would watch movies, hang out with my friends. So having a rest day will prevent you from burning out, burning out, because if you just study 7 days a week, 24/7, you're going to like not do well. So make sure that you don't take the time for yourself. It is a long exam. It's more about your stamina. It's a marathon, really, not a sprint. Another big mistake people make is spending too much time reviewing content. Content review will only take you so far. You have to practice the questions. There's a difference between knowing what an atomic nucleus is and being able to apply that in a passage-based MCAT question. And so I would suggest you split your study time 50-50, 50% content review, 50% practice. I spoke about this briefly earlier. If you overcommit your stuff to other things, you'll obviously have less time to study for the MCAT. So make sure that you can study for at least 2 to 3 hours a day for the MCAT dedicated time. And that should be enough for, like 3 months to properly study and get a good score. Not having a study schedule, I think this, again, it's a marathon. You need to have some sort of schedule so that you're on track and you have a structured way to tackle the questions and tackle the content review. Spaced repetition is your best friend for the MCAT, especially for things like chemistry, physics, biochem, where it's all like little facts that you simply just have to know. You have to know Avogadro's number. You have to know how many protons are in this, right? So like having flashcards such as Anki or Quizlet, really, really good way for you to practice just recalling that information very quickly. I used Anki for pretty much every section except cars, and I thought it was really, really helpful. Depending on how many weeks you have, obviously it'll take a lot of time out of your day to do Anki, but like I was able to recall formulas and facts very, very quickly, which will save you a lot of time when you're doing the MCAT. Yeah, so final notes about the MCAT. I hope this was helpful. Yeah, so MedGames has those 2 programs. The longitudinal one is starting in October, and the summer MCAT program starts in May 2025. So if you're interested, feel free to email MedGames at their email, or you can also check out the website. Yeah, and I'll take any questions. in the last sort of 5 minutes from anyone. Someone has asked, how many times can I apply to med school with one MCAT result? If I don't get accepted the first time, do I have to redo the MCAT? Thank God you do not. If you do well on the MCAT the first time, you only have to do it once. Yeah. So yeah, imagine having to write the MCAT every time you have to apply for med. Oh my gosh, I would just give up. Yeah, so you're good. Any other questions? You can put in the chat, you can direct message me, or you can just unmute or raise your hand. It can be about MCAT, it can be about medicine, med school, etc. Are you in med school right now? I just finished med school at Mac. So that Mac's program is 3 years, and I'm in residency right now at Queen's. The last day to write the MCAT is September 16th, I believe. So this is the day I write on. Will the marks not reach AMC in time to apply for the cycle? Yeah. So if you write September 16th, I don't think that's enough time for your score to get to like the program. It depends again on what specific program you're applying to, right? So you want to make sure that you go check the UBC website or the OMSAS website to see like when is the application actually due and when do they need to get my MCAT results by. Typically it takes 4 to 6 weeks for your MCAT to be scored. So that's the timeline that you have to sort of write before the application is due. Yeah, okay. How did you manage to get such a high score on the first try for your MCAT? That's the mystery, isn't it? I think it was twofold. Like one, I had a lot of the content already sort of down pat because of like the brutality of U of T life science. So that was drilled into my head. Two, I think I spent a lot of time on practice exams. I think I did 13 practice exams before my actual exam. So by the time I got there to my actual test, I was like, I've literally done, this is the 14th practice exam that I'm taking. So it felt just like another day. So I would do a practice exam every other day for 5 weeks straight, which was a lot, but it literally like, it drilled it into me, and that was a really, really helpful thing for me to get my stamina up, review all my knowledge, and I kept track of my mistakes throughout that exam, throughout all those exams, so I could like review them before, the week before my test. Yeah, so those are the, I think that's how I got a good score. Sorry, go ahead. Hi, sorry, could you mute, Jasleen? Thanks. Is there a specific Anki deck you use? Yes, I use the Mile Down Anki deck. A lot of people use Jack Sparrow. I find that Jack Sparrow had way too many cards, to be honest, that I didn't have time in those 5 weeks of content review I did to get through all the cards. So I chose Mile Down. Mile Down was great. I actually, for Psych Soc, like I only studied Psych Soc with the Anki cards because it was a lot of just like memorizing like who made this theory and who discovered this fact, like those kind of things. So yeah, that was really, really helpful for that section specifically. What would you consider to be a competitive score? Good question. So this depends on the school that you're trying to apply for. Some schools have cutoffs. Some schools use your score competitively. For example, U of T only requires that you have a 125 in each section, which is, I believe, the 50th percentile. So you have to be sort of smack down the middle in terms of how good you are compared to the rest of the people. So that's U of T. It has a cutoff-based system. McMaster, for example, has a competitive score. So they only consider your CARS score specifically. So if you have a better CARS score, you have a better chance of getting an interview at McMaster. And so, yeah, again, I would make an Excel sheet with all the med schools you want to apply for and write down the criteria that they have for the MCAT, which you can find on their medical school website. So that's something that I did before deciding what schools to apply for. I'm writing on August 30th. Is that enough time for Ontario med schools to receive results? That's a great question. I would go on the OMSAS website and check. Based on this, I think it's a little late, given that it might take 6 weeks for your results to come in. I think this is from OMSAS. You have to write it before August 10th, 2024. So just go double check that on the website to make sure that I'm not giving you any sort of wrong information. Oh, there we go. So OMSAS says they're due by the, sorry, someone has kindly put the information in the chat. You have to write by the 18th. So it is not enough time. Is that September 18th or August 18th? So don't. Okay. I have 1 minute left. There's a lot of questions. I'm sorry, I don't think I'll be able to get through all of these. But again, I'll just go back to the first slide. If you have any further questions, just either email me or reach out on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll definitely get back to you. Where was I? Okay. I do not feel ready to write my MCAT on August 10th. Only writing cars. I can apply to Mac and Ottawa. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, that's definitely like a possibility. Ottawa doesn't look at the MCAT and McMaster only looks at your cars. So if you're willing to sort of, like tank the fee for the MCAT, that's totally an option. Like, if you have good stats, like your GPA and your Casper scores are good, then you have a great shot at getting an interview at McMaster. So definitely an option. If I have about 50 days to do MCAT study, how do you recommend I budget my time, content review? Again, if you have 50 days, I would do 25 days of content review, 25 days of practice. I think 50-50 split is really good. Obviously, if you have less content review, like sort of already in your background, I think 50 days might be cutting it very short. That's only what, like roughly 5 weeks. Yeah, so it's a very, very short timeline, right? So you want to sort of really consider maybe trying a practice exam at the beginning and seeing how much you already know, and seeing how much you have to go forward to do better. Satya, do you want me to like just cut it here, given that it's 12:30, or can I use like 5 minutes for questions? Up to you. If there's a hard cutoff, I'll end it here.
Yeah, I think just because we are trying to run on a schedule, we're
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome.
No problem. So yeah, you guys can reach out to me with any questions at these addresses. Perfect. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lakindu.
No problem. Have a good one.
Awesome. You too. Perfect. All right, and so thanks so much, Lakindu, and we're going to also be sharing these slides with you. So after the session, if you want to look up Lakindu's information that he had shared there and contact him, I think he would be glad to help you if he has some time as well. So let's get the questions going, and you're going to have some time to ask me questions after my presentation, and we have many other students presenting here as well today. So you'll have multiple opportunities to ask questions as we go. So as I said earlier, my name is Satya Athal. I'm an incoming student at Queen's University. Specifically, I'll be attending the Queen's Lakeridge program. This is perhaps a program that not a lot of you know about. It's a relatively new program. It's the second year that it's running. So I'm going to be talking about that, a little bit about myself as well and my journey, and about the Casper program that MedGames runs. Okay, just a second. There we go. So a little bit about me. So I think would be like the definition of what non-trad is. In fact, when I did my medical school, I had no intention of going, when I did my undergrad, I had no intention of even going into medical school. I really liked epidemiology, and that was sort of my passion when I did my undergrad. So I did my undergrad at Mac, did my master's at Mac in global health. And I worked in the government for Department of National Defense, as well as Public Health Agency of Canada as an epidemiologist. And also for the last 8 years, I've been working in the military, in the Canadian Armed Forces as a military medic. So working for the Department of National Defense as an epidemiologist and as a military medic sort of goes hand in hand, or went hand in hand for me. And just through that experience and through some events in my own personal life, I sort of realized that, perhaps I want to do medical school. So this was, right after years of working, after my master's and everything, I realized that perhaps medical school is something that I ought to consider. But as we all know, Canadian med schools can be incredibly competitive, and you sort of have to have this mindset about wanting to go to medical school, when you are in your undergrad and knowing, what courses to take and the GPA to achieve and all that, which I did not have. I did not want to go to medical school when I did my first undergrad, which is why I actually did another undergrad, simply for the sake of increasing my GPA. So I did that at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University. Did a Bachelor of Applied Science in Public Health, which greatly helped me. And I was fortunate enough to get into the Queen's University Lakeridge program in my first application. My MCAT I got a 520, and I was also a previous student of the Med Games program. So in fact, when I was studying for my MCAT, Lakindu was one of my tutors, which greatly helped me. And I have been a Med Games tutor for the last year as well. So yeah, those are just some pictures I attached there. Love dogs. Obviously, I have in this picture, the white dog is mine, the brown one is my neighbor's. I also have another dog as well. I also put my contact information there in case you want to reach me for any sort of questions or even want to talk about just a non-trad journey. If any of you have any sort of similar experiences as mine to have any questions, for sure, I'd be glad to answer. Just some reflections about my own journey. Like getting into medical school, I think we typically think of it as being, just like a very linear path. Just having that, undergrad, med school, sort of that grind and getting right in. And I think, if that is your path and that's what you want to do, that's great, good for you. But for a lot of people, myself included, obviously it was not like a linear journey. I did what I truly enjoyed, epidemiology, working in the military, that kind of stuff. And I think that just inherently made my extracurriculars perhaps stand out more than others. Obviously, research and volunteering and all this is very important. But I think, I think what ultimately in my experience and what I think stands out is authenticity. And that authenticity, I think, is very well reflected in interviews, in applications and everything. And when you have a passion for what you're doing, I think that is very well reflected. Another thing it's like a personal philosophy is I never view things as stepping stones. What I mean by that is I never, see something as, oh, I'm doing this for medical school, right? So like, let's say I'm doing research and I'm doing research to get into medical school, but I don't necessarily like it, right? But I'm just doing it to getting into med school, right? So, and that is viewing something as a stepping stone, and that's something I personally did not do, and that's just my own philosophy. But yeah, so ultimately doing things that you like to do, sort of, and pursuing things out of authenticity, in my opinion, from my own reflections, it really stands out and makes for a great medical applicant and even perhaps a great future physician as well. Yeah, so I'm going to get into the Casper program, but yeah, if any of you want to talk about, if any of you are non-trad students and want to talk about a journey and have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have as well. Perfect. So going into Casper, so Casper is obviously a test that I do believe is becoming more and more common. A lot of medical schools in Canada, I know McMaster requires it, Queen's requires it, Calgary does. Some schools don't. I don't think Toronto does. But yeah, so this is a test that is becoming more and more required in Canadian medical schools. It is I think as of last year, consists of two sections, so a video and a type section. Previously used to just be a type section, and a total of 14 scenarios across two sections. So there's a video section as well as a type section. In the video section, you'll actually be shown a video, and based on that video, you'll have two, typed answers and four video-based answers where you have to actually record a video and submit it based on the video that you have just watched. Right. And for each scenario, you're going to have to record videos to answer two open-ended questions, and you'll have 1 minute to record each response. Same thing for the type response. You'll have 3 word-based scenarios and watch 5 video-based scenarios. And for each of this, you'll have to type answers to 3 open-ended questions. Right. So I know this sounds like a lot. There is, in fact, resources that I'll be providing on the next slide, which really explains in detail exactly what the Casper is. And I'll be going over that in the next couple of slides as well. So just explaining more about Casper, the total test takes around 90 to 110 minutes, and with breaks. So the breaks are optional. You may choose to simply not do it, but I would highly recommend to take a break, simply because sometimes, if you have a scenario that you feel like you did not do as well, or you're simply stressed, just taking a break, taking some time as a breather may really help you to get back into that positive mindset. So I would definitely say take a break. Also 90 to 110 minutes, that's without any accommodations. I personally did not use any accommodations, but I do know people that have had accommodations for Casper. So, if testing scenarios makes you anxious, or if you have any other sort of condition that may impair your ability to do good on Casper, I would encourage you to submit a request for an accommodation. So please look at the Casper website and look into this in more detail if in fact you need an accommodation. From what I heard, this is not as complicated as getting an MCAT accommodation. So it's relatively straightforward from what I heard. But if you are a person that requires an accommodation, just really look into it. And I think sometimes they do give you a little bit more time to do certain questions on the Casper. So this is the Casper is assessed by human raters. So it's not like AI or anything like this. And yeah, so I do believe they're given training in how to answer these questions in terms of implicit bias, or accents, and so they're given training to actually assess the quality of your responses as opposed to anything else. So it's assessed by human raters, and unfortunately, you are not going to get your score, right after your exam. You're going to have to wait for 2 to 3 weeks, or even I think like around a month, from what I remember, where you'll get an email after that saying that, oh, your scores are ready, and you can actually see, what quartile you're in, right? So that's the thing with Casper. Unfortunately, I think it is a little bit anxiety inducing, or for me personally, it was. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay. Yeah, so this website over here, I put a QR code to. It's by Acuity Insights. That's the company that runs Casper. So definitely check out that link. They have all the frequently asked questions and all that. And there was a webinar. So this is, I think, around 55 minutes long webinar. So we're not going to be playing it here, obviously, but definitely check that webinar out. From what I heard, it's a very good webinar. They give you a lot of information about Casper. So if you have time, definitely watch that webinar as well. And we're going to be providing this slideshow later on as well. We're going to be emailing this to all of you, so you'll have access to that video and QR code and everything as well. Okay, so Med Games, we run a Casper program, and I'm just gonna briefly talk about what our program now and how we run it. So broadly speaking, there are around 4 sort of categories of questions you can expect to see on your Casper, right? So these can be ethical questions, policy questions, group conflict questions, and even personal questions. And in our program, we provide a strategic breakdown or ways in which you answer or approach each question. For example, here we provided a example breakdown of ethical scenarios and policy scenarios. So for your ethical scenarios, the first thing you're going to do is sort of recognize what that conflict is. What is the ethical conflict at play, right? And you are going to actually verbalize or state that conflict. And then you're going to approach each side, right? So you're going to say, in side 1, what would be the consequences for taking one decision? And so if this happens, I will do such or like that. And you'll also discuss the other side as well. So you will assess the consequences and outcomes from the other side of this ethical conflict. And then you're going to have to take action. So a lot of times people, simply explore each side of the argument, but they don't really verbalize what their decision is going to be, right? So taking an action and clearly, communicating what choice you will make in this scenario is essential, right? So, or you can even add alternatives if neither side is good. You can even do that and explain what you're doing, right? Or even add novel solutions, right? So that is very important. But this is like a rough breakdown of how you would answer an ethical scenario. For policy scenarios, we'd also explore the consequences of the specific policy. So if a policy is enforced, there's a way to answer it. If a policy is not enforced yet, there's a way to answer it. But you have to choose how, once again, you're going to answer your policy scenarios as well. So in our Casper program, we sort of provide like a strategic breakdown for not only ethical and policy scenarios, but also personal questions and group conflict scenarios as well. So for example, in your personal questions, you may have heard of the STAR approach, right? And this is just like an acronym which will help you sort of answer personal questions. And personally, in my opinion, having this sort of a structure to your answer in Casper not only helps you sort of look prepared and have a good answer for Casper and have your thoughts organized, but I do think it also helps you prepare for your interviews as well, right? Because ultimately Casper, in my mind, is just like a mini interview. So having organized thoughts sort of increases the clarity of your communication, and this will reflect well on both the Casper and the interview as well. So as a part of our Casper program, we do provide 4 sample tests that MedGames has made. So with our own scenarios. So each test has 8 scenario-based questions and 4 personal questions. And we not only provide the questions, but we also provide a strategy breakdown for each question and sample answers for that as well. We do also connect you with free resources as well for Casper, in addition to our own resources. In addition to providing the tests, we also have peer take-up sessions, right? So typically small class sizes, and these are just sessions where we take up individual scenarios where people get an opportunity not only to answer questions but also provide feedback to their own peers. So that I think is a really good sort of a part of our program, and a part that we have sort of received very good feedback for. We can also arrange for individual sessions. So if there's a tutor that you particularly like and you like the way they sort of support you or give you feedback, you can also request individual sessions with any of your tutors who would be glad to help you if they have any time. Once again, all of our tutors are Canadian medical students or Canadian medical graduates. So people who have really been through this program or Casper program and have done this and have a good idea of what to expect. We also give you like a list of phrases and words that really are appropriate in answering Casper questions, right? And sometimes just having that professional language is very important. And so using phrases such as, in a private setting, that's sort of one of those very, popular ones, but also, but being bound by professional obligations, or, after self-reflecting, or saying that, without jumping to conclusions, what you'll do, right? A lot of times these are sort of natural things that we would think of, right? Like obviously we're not going to jump to conclusions. And, if you would imagine a professional, like a physician or something else, obviously we know that people are bound by professional obligations, but verbalizing this and actually, using these phrases is very important in communicating the way in which you think during your Casper. So we also provide you with a list of phrases and words. I know there are some questions coming in the chat, so I will be answering these questions after I finish these slides, and then I'll be answering these questions. Practice, of course, is very important for Casper. Once again, think of Casper like a mini interview, right? And that is essentially what Casper is. Casper is a mini interview. So if you have any questions about our Casper program, just feel free to email us at medgames.org@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm open to any questions right now. So anything in the chat or elsewhere. So let's see what questions I have right now. What time of the year would you recommend taking Casper? Okay, so Casper typically, I believe you can take even after your OMSAS application is done. So it's not, you don't have to have it done when you submit, by the time you submit your application to medical school. But different schools have different sort of dates for the Casper. So I would encourage you to check the school-specific website to when they want Casper done. You also have to keep in mind that the results of your Casper will be delivered to that school only 2 to 3 weeks after you do your Casper. So please check that school's website when you are booking the Casper, right? So definitely do that. Also keep in mind that you're only allowed to do Casper once a year. So you cannot do Casper more than once a year. I know there's a separate one for like America and all that, but if you're applying to Canadian schools, you can only do Casper once every year. So look at all the schools you're applying to and base your decision based on which is that earliest Casper deadline for of the schools you're applying to. Just make note of which has the earliest Casper deadline and then apply to that. If I remember correctly, I know I had to submit Casper to Queens and McMaster, and I think I did my Casper somewhere around like the mid to end October. Yeah, so definitely check the website for that. How do we go about requesting an MCAT accommodation? Okay, so once again, I just want to reiterate, so the MCAT accommodation and Casper accommodation, two completely different things. So for the MCAT accommodation, I do believe you have to go through the AAMC. And they actually do and I have not personally received an MCAT accommodation, but from what I've heard from people I know that have got accommodations, they'd had to get specific letters from some very specialized healthcare provider who was able to provide these accommodations for the MCAT, and that costed a whole bunch of money. For Casper, I do think it's a little bit different. Once again, go to the Acuity Insights website. So these are the people that run Casper, and you should be able to see how to get a Casper accommodations from that website over there. Okay, what's the next question? When would the last day to complete Casper apply to 2024-25 cycle? Yeah, so once again, so the last day depends on the school, as I said earlier. So definitely check on this the school you're applying to. But yeah, just keep in mind that your Casper deadline and your OMSAS deadline is not the same thing. Okay, so definitely check the school you're applying to, and you may even find information on the Casper website as well. So please check the deadline on the specific school website. When do you recommend taking the program if you are doing the MCAT next year around September, December, the Casper program specifically? Okay, sorry, could you be a little bit more specific about that question? So you're doing your MCAT around September, December next year, so you want to know when you're doing the Casper program? Okay, okay, so all right, so if you're so MCAT and Casper are obviously two different things, right? They're just different parts of your med school application. Some schools require, both the MCAT and Casper. Some schools only require Casper and not MCAT, and vice versa. For example, I do believe Ottawa requires Casper, but does not require MCAT for their application. Yeah, if someone can correct me if this is wrong, but I do believe that Ottawa requires Casper, but does not require MCAT. Toronto, on the other hand, requires MCAT, but does not require Casper, right? So these are just different parts of application, and some schools require both MCAT and Casper, right? Queens requires MCAT and Casper. So if you are, so I know in this question you said that you're doing your MCAT next year around September to December. So I'm guessing it's 2025 you're doing your MCAT. But if you are planning on applying to medical school this cycle, the med schools that do not require your MCAT, I would say, do the Casper program around October or September, October when it's offered. If you are not applying to med school this cycle, there's no point in taking the Casper program a year earlier, right? So I hope that answers your question. So these are two very separate parts of an application, MCAT and Casper. So yeah, I would not recommend doing your Casper studying and MCAT studying at the same time, however. Yeah, is someone unmuted? Okay, I would not recommend doing the Casper and the MCAT at the same time, just because that obviously can be a lot. But yeah, so just do the Casper. If you're applying to schools that do not require the MCAT, definitely do the Casper sometime this fall. And if you're doing the MCAT and the Casper, I would suggest start studying for your Casper after you've done your MCAT for sure. Is the Casper program offered all the time or during specific dates? So it's only offered during specific dates. So I do believe it's offered in October. So we will have more information on our website, and you can even contact us at our email. I also do think that there's a MedGames rep who's going to give the next presentation, and they'll have more specific dates about when the Casper program is offered this year. But it is not offered all the time. It's only very specific dates. Yeah. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay, so only in October. Yeah, I do believe it's probably only in October. But once again, just email them and they'll have more information. From what I've heard, they're also planning to sort of have more sessions throughout the fall as well. So maybe even October, November, so on, just because different schools have different deadlines. So yeah, so just keep just follow our Instagram page, just look at our website or even email us, and we'll definitely have more information about when our Casper program is for sure. Yeah. Perfect. All right, so is there any other questions here? If there's no other questions, I'll just hand it off to our MedGames representative, who's going to just briefly talk about all of our programs and if you have any questions. Once again, if you are a non-traditional applicant like I was and have any questions for me specifically, we'll be sending these slides to you, so you can find my contact information there. Just feel free to contact me or email MedGames, who can also put you in touch with me if you have any questions about that non-traditional pathway to medicine as well. Okay, so that being said, whoever is next can sort of continue now.
Hey, Cynthia, thanks. Yeah, I'm doing the applications part here, but I can share my screen and I'll take over.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right. I hope everyone can see my screen here. And so I'm going to be talking about medical school applications, right? So this is a bit of a lengthy slideshow. I'll try to move quick, but not too fast. If you have questions, of course, ask them, and then I'll get to them towards the end. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Deepan Sharma. I am an incoming medical student at the University of Ottawa. So I'm from Windsor, small town just south, close to like Detroit, right across the border. And that's where I did my undergrad. And I applied twice. I wrote my MCAT more than once. So it's not, like Satya said, it's not a straight line process. There's going to be curves, there's going to be some speed bumps, but you just got to persevere. Some things about me, I hate cars. So if there's other people in the chat that have had to rewrite because of cars, we can maybe start a club or something. I mean, like I said, like Lakindu said, it was one of our weakest sections. So definitely don't like cars. I was a previous student for med games, and now I'm a biology tutor for med games. But also, I'm here doing the application process as well. So I wrote my MCAT last year. Lakindu was my tutor. Satya was my tutor. So it's a kind of a full circle moment for me to now be able to give back to, med games the way that they gave back to me when I was a student as well. And some of my favorite shows are The Office, Lincoln Lawyer, and of course, I love playing basketball, as you can see from the background. And there's my email if you guys have any questions, but you guys can also just search my name up here, and I'm sure it'll come up on, social media, Instagram, etc. So these are the Canadian medical schools. I mean, I'm not going to go through each one of them. Like I'm not going to list every single one, but there's around, I think, 16. Ontario, of course, has the bulk of them. But it's important just to pick what schools you want to apply to, based on in province, out of province, favoritism. Some schools have that. A lot of schools have that, except Ontario, unfortunately. But making sure you're aware of the different timelines and cutoffs, like everyone has mentioned previously. And I have experience applying to Ontario and British Columbia, so I can maybe shed some insight into those, but we do have information on the rest of them as well. So there's some components to your Ontario application, right? So this is your OMSAS ABS, or your autobiographical sketch. Now, what is this? It's sort of like a resume, but you have like a sentence and a half to write about each entry that you have. And so OMSAS breaks it up for you very kindly into your employment section, volunteer, extracurriculars, awards and accomplishments, your research, and your other. So you can fill up as much as you want in each, but you have 32 maximum entries, meaning that you can have 32 employment and 0 of everything, or most people balance it out and we'll have 5 here, 7 here, 10 here, etc. And they'll fill up as much as they can. I mean, there's no good number. A lot of people will ask, well, how many should I have? It's more about quality over quantity, right? I know that's cliche, but it's really important to just have a good amount of things that you're passionate about, things that truly demonstrate who you are, rather than just trying to fill all 32 boxes. And so, aside from the ABS, schools do have essays as well. So the University of Toronto has your BPEs, or your brief personal essays. And it's really important in these essays to be personal. It's in the title here, brief personal essays. So they'll ask questions that are sometimes ambiguous or have quotes or, things that are going on in today's society. And they want to ask what's your opinion on it, and how does that relate back to you in medicine? So you want to pick a personal experience if you can, and then relate that back to medicine and why that would make you a better physician. I did the program with Med Games last year in terms of having them edit my Toronto essays, and they were extremely helpful. I was very happy with my U of T essays, and I definitely recommend checking that out. And I'll get to that later as well. But there's also a third essay for University of Toronto, which in my first cycle applying, I didn't know this. So I wrote my 2 essays, and then a week before apps were due, I rushed this last essay because I had no idea it existed. But this is where you pick one activity from your ABS and you can expand on it. So you have 500 words, which is nice. And you can write a long story about, how it's meaningful to you, what you learned from it, and how that would make you a better colleague, a better medical student, a physician, and how those skills that you've learned will translate into the realm of medicine. Schulich, also known as Western, has now changed something for the 2024-2025 cycle. Now, I don't have all the information about this, but I do know that they used to have 8 essays maximum that you could write. And it was encouraged to write all 8 essays, but I think they realized that a lot of people don't like to write 8 essays, especially coming from rigorous undergrad programs. So they've made it 4 essays, 1 essay per topic. And there's also allowed third years to apply. So if you're in third year, you're now able to apply to Schulich School of Medicine. I have a few friends there, a great program. And then NOSM for the 2024-2025 cycle has also removed essays. So now to get an interview, you just have your contact score, which is where you grew up. So if you grew up in a rural area, that adds to your contact score. That's really ambiguous in how they determine what your contact score is. So again, consult their website for more information, but also your GPA plays a role as well. And then interviews, of course. One thing that I did want to mention that I kind of forgot at the beginning is GPA. A lot of people will ask, how much of a factor does GPA play in your application? And you don't need a 4.0 and you don't need a 520 to get into medical school in Canada. Of course, that's nice and that can help, but it doesn't get you in, right? Being a person, people that have, very, I wouldn't say unique, but, experiences that tell a story, I think is more important than having stats. I mean, my GPA was 3.93 and I was able to get admission, right? So I think it speaks volumes to how important having a great ABS is, a great resume, being involved in your community is. So yeah, I'll get into that a little bit later as well. So in Western Canada, right? So moving across, we have the University of Alberta, and here you have your personal highlights and activities. So there's a character limits on all of these, and I want you guys to make sure you understand that. I think these include spaces. I know Western includes spaces when they're counting characters. And again, I didn't know that my first time applying, but it's important to keep note of that as well when you're typing them up in a Word document or a Google document. The UBC has your activities, which are 350 characters each. So UBC is more so like OMSAS, where you're able to, put an activity and then write about it. OMSAS is 150 characters. Here you have 200 extra characters. So it's nice to be able to expand and have that flexibility to really showcase what you did and why you did that. And there's an example later on in the slideshow that demonstrates a UBC entry. And then we also have the University of Calgary, which is your top 10 activities. And then you can explain these with your 1,000 characters each. And, you have 250 characters for the description. Now, the thing is, it's University of Ottawa is very similar to this, where looking at your ABS, you have to pick a top 3 from each category. So if I'm able to go back here, sorry, I don't mean to go back, but so the University of Ottawa asks that you pick your top 3 from each category, meaning that they want your top 3 from your employment, your top 3 from volunteer, extracurriculars, etc. They basically just don't want to read your whole ABS. So it's similar to Calgary, in where you have to sort of sift through your experiences and pick which ones are the most meaningful and ones that really showcase who you are. And that can be a very difficult decision, because I know you guys are great applicants, and some of you may have stellar extracurriculars that you want to showcase but simply can't because of that the top 10 or the top 3 per category. And then in Dalhousie out east, we had to have 5 essays, which are 1,700 characters each. So it's important to look up on these websites, see what the topics are, what you need to write in these essays. And yeah, so when do these portals open, right? So in mid-June is when UBC opens Dalhousie Memorial University, which is in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's already open now, and you can apply, and it's encouraged to get those applications started if you do want to apply there. Now, I know there's some confusion about Casper dates. I'm pretty sure Casper, you're able to write it in July as well. One of my friends who applied to Dalhousie wrote it early because they have a cutoff for when they need your scores by. So you can definitely write it early, but it just depends what school you're applying to. And early July, so in a few days, I believe OMSAS will open, the University of Alberta, Calgary, Saskatchewan. And then we also have August, which is Manitoba. Early September is McGill. And then there's a new medical school opening up this year, which is TMU, or Toronto Metropolitan University, which I think is going to be separate from OMSAS this year because it's their first year, but I think they open early October. And these deadlines, it's important to keep a tab on when the deadlines are, right? So again, these are all things accessible online, but we've just put them into one slide here for you. So August 28th, September 3rd, 13th, October 1st, and November 2024. It's important to take note of all these and make sure you have, because right now you have ample time. So make sure that you're done your application, I'd say a week in advance before all these deadlines are due, so you're not cramming. And so now we get to references. References are a big part, and I want to spend some time here just talking about how important they are. But before I get to that, there's 3 types of references that you can choose for OMSAS. And I know most of you might be applying to Ontario schools. So OMSAS specifically requires you to have an academic or employment referee, a non-academic referee, and someone of your choosing. Anyone, could be whoever you want, just not family. I know some people have asked that. No family members, even friends. It's difficult and it's risky, so please don't. Our recommendations from people that have helped others get into medical school is having an academic or research reference. So someone that can speak to your capabilities in the lab and contributing to research is really impactful and meaningful. Number 2, we recommend something in the volunteering space. So community involvement and like such as hospital volunteering, and I'll get to that in a bit. And the last one here is extracurricular leadership. So if you've had any leadership positions, if you're president of a club, or if you have a professor on campus that is willing to write a reference and has seen you, um, through the years manage a club and has seen how you've grown the club over the years, that can be a great reference as well. And references are really important, and it can significantly impact your application. And so my first cycle, there's a question in the chat, and this is exactly what I want to get to. I worked with a few physicians, and I was like, you know what? They're doctors. They're going to write me a great reference letter. I got 0 interviews, nothing. And on my second year, I said, you know what? Like, I'm just going to pick people that truly know me. I'm going to pick my professor that I TA'd with. I worked at a pharmacy. I just picked one of the pharmacists that, I really could bond with, someone that played basketball with me. I went to their house for dinner, just people that I had a really good relationship with and knew me well. And my last one was my lab supervisor. So again, someone I spent a lot of time with in the lab setting and in a professional setting as well. So as you can see, with those 3 references, I hit all 3 different types, and I was able to get interviews cycle and get in. So the big name is not more valuable, I would say. I would rather have someone that can speak volumes to the person and can provide specific examples of when they demonstrated empathy, compassion, problem solving skills, or has a real weakness. Because AMSAS asks, what is the weakness of an applicant? And some people will say, oh, like a cookie cutter answer. But if your referee or your reference is able to really pick on something that they see in you that can potentially be better, adcoms can see through that. Just like they can see a generic essay, they can also see a generic reference letter. And so it's really important to forget the names. Just pick people that know you well, that can speak highly of you, but you also have a good relationship with, and you've had ample time to build these relationships with and good rapport with. So um, I definitely would say uh, a physician reference, like mentioned in the chat, it can be valuable if you've built that relationship with them. But again, it's more important to just pick references that really know you well and can speak to your character and who you truly are, because that's what medical schools are really looking for. And so this is your OMSAS timeline, right? So from now to August 15th, you should be working on your demographics and personal info. So OMSAS asks for all that, family history, etc. You should be putting in your prerequisite courses. So you need to do that for some schools, like I believe the University of Toronto, the University of Ottawa, and your transcripts. You should request your transcripts early, so you have them and you're not stressing last minute because your school is running behind from all the other people requesting their transcripts. Also reach out to your referees, make sure you know who you want as your references, make sure they're okay to write your references. Maybe even sit down and ask them, or provide them with some times that you feel like you demonstrated certain CanMeds roles. I know that's what I did with my references, and it allowed them to write references that were extremely meaningful to me, but also demonstrated what they thought of me as well. And also, you should be doing a rough sketch of your ABS right now, right? So looking at what CanMed roles fit with what you already have on your CV and resume, and being able to try to connect those and tie those in is really important. And for each entry on your ABS, you need someone that's a verifier. So you need someone to verify each activity. So at the same time you're reaching out to your referees, it's important to reach out to your verifiers as well. And start thinking about your essays. So this is the busiest time of year because you have to get everything in order. So start looking at these essay topics that Toronto has released or Schulich has released, and try to connect again some parts from your resumes, and try to think of personal experiences that you can tie into your essays. And then August 15th, so mid-August to beginning of September, you should be finalizing your ABS. You should have worked on your essays, and if you're doing the Med Games program, you would have your edits done by then. You would have worked with a medical student to the schools you're applying to, and you would have had those drafts and edits done during that time, which is a good estimate. And everything should be finalized, like I said, a week before the OMSAS deadline is due. So September 26th to the 29th, you should be putting everything into the portal, because again, when 10,000 people are putting information into the website, it can tend to be slow or it may crash. So you just want to be safe. I always did it a few days beforehand. I definitely do recommend that as well. And then submitting before the deadline as well. I submitted the day before, the night before. So the ABS, right? So in employment, like I said, there's a bunch of different ones here, but what are some things you can include? So in employment, I included things that were I got paid. So being a TA on campus, any work experience. So for me, it was working at the pharmacy, or if you had a retail job or you worked fast food, any paid research I would include here as well. Volunteering. So like I said, hospital volunteering, being in a research lab. If you volunteered your first 3 years in the research lab and got paid in your fourth year, include those first 3 years as a time where you volunteered. Any community work, right? So volunteering at camps, etc., are things that I would include in volunteer as well. And extracurriculars, I would have clubs. So I'm sure all of you guys are part of a club in some shape or form. So including our clubs and your roles and what you've done, but also sporting teams. So if you play sports in high school, I included my high school sports, but even in university, you can include those as well. And then awards and accomplishments, you can have, your scholarships, your dean's list, your honors, any research awards that you've won. But in research, this is where you can include if you've presented at conferences, if you've had oral presentations or poster presentations, if you have publications, and even publications in progress. This is one that I was a little bit skeptical about, but I applied with this. I just put that the publication was in progress or accepted or submitted, and it all worked out. And in the other section here, right? So I left this one blank because, I mean, there's no formula to the other. You can put whatever you'd like. You can put an instrument you play, a hobby that you have, something you truly enjoy doing, something that's a non-structured experience, which you've listed up here. So all these don't have to be formal experiences. They can be things like, you enjoy gardening, or you enjoy going for walks or runs, etc. And this really, again, ties that back into who you truly are and gives AdComs an opportunity to see who you are outside of school, outside of the GPA, outside of just being an applicant, who you truly are as a person. So I definitely recommend filling the other section out. A lot of people will leave it blank, but I mean, that's another opportunity for you to showcase who you are. So some ABS tips, right? So we want to be specific. So you want to clearly describe what you're doing, how long you did it, who was involved. So always give numbers, especially if you fundraised money. It's good to say that, I've raised $5,000 for students in Latin America, for example, or anything like that. Always include concrete numbers. It allows someone to visualize what they're reading. Also, your goals and accomplishments, right? If you grew during this time, it's important to explain that and show how you grew over time. And I'll give you an example here. So I was team captain of my basketball team, and then I was camp counselor as well for basketball in the summers. But then now when I was in university, I went back and I coached my high school basketball team. And so I included each one of those things as separate entries. But I think that told a story, right? How a student was part of that team, left, graduated, was still involved with the community in some way, shape, or form. And then after COVID, I was able to come back and be a coach. And that shows how my role changed and evolved over time, but also how I remained committed. And that longitudinal commitment is really important. And then the CanMed roles. So these CanMed roles you can find online, but it's important to include these subtly. And like it says, weave them into your description. So I led a team of 8 people in planning and running a ... right? So this shows that, again, you're using a number, 8 people. You led that team, and then you can describe what you guys were planning, running, setting up, etc. And this is a really important point here: is do not emphasize how you were like a doctor or how your experiences are specific to medicine, right? So in my ABS, I never related anything back to medicine. It was just who I am, what I did, and what I learned from it. It was nothing in terms of, oh, this will make me a better physician, or as a future physician, I did this, or I learned this. It was never that in your ABS. So please don't do that. It can be frowned upon. So when you have multiple tasks in non-trad activities, like how do you do this, right? So if you have multiple tasks, it's important to include them both. If they're big enough tasks to have separate descriptions, a separate verifier, you can break them up. And I'll give you an example here, which is on the side. So I was an undergraduate research assistant, which means I, of course, had my own project. I was a research assistant during my undergrad. But in that same role, I was a peer mentor. So we had a thing in our lab where I was able to mentor young students in their first and second year, have them shadow me in my project, teach them, things like cell culture, lab etiquette, etc. And so I put that as, a separate role that I had under, my volunteering as a peer mentor as well. And I had different verifier for each, which I think is important. But again, you can do this with multiple tasks, like I did with my basketball, right? I was a player and a coach, split that up, even though they're related activities. I can split them up and ensure that, you have different verifiers for each. And then non-trad experiences, right? So like I mentioned, you don't have to have all these formal roles. You can have these non-typical experiences and activities that you really enjoy, learning new languages, traveling, helping family members, taking your grandmother to a doctor's appointment is one, or I know some of my friends included, they loved gardening or they loved planting flowers every summer. And those things, again, truly show who you are outside of medicine. And so your titles of your entries are important as well. And there's a character limit on, your ABS descriptions, but also your title limits. But it's important to use as much as you can, right? So instead of swim instructor, put exactly what you did, right? So if you were helping a certain demographic, you were a special needs swimming instructor. That gives me a better idea of who you are, and you really don't need to include this now in your description. So you save those characters in your description to expand on something else, like a CanMeds role. Instead of research assistant, clinical studies research assistant, or instead of just artist, you can put I was an abstract artist or a spoken word artist or a creative artist. So it's important to do that instead. And so one thing that I do want to say here is the punctuation is important. Although we do have limited character spaces, you don't want to sacrifice grammar or punctuality just to fit it in because it won't look pretty. So instead of students and helped, right? Like this does not look good. It does not look like you're an applicant to medical school, right? So you can either use students and helped, or for me, even you can use this and abbreviation, but make sure you're consistent and keep it there. Don't omit the spaces. If you're going to use the and abbreviation, always use the and abbreviation. And like it says here, it reduces the readability and professionalism of your application if you're going to write things like this just to fit it in. And formatting. So, when I was getting my ABS edited by a lot of people, I had the word with everywhere, and they said you can just use W/. They understand that you have a character limit and that you want to fit some stuff in. So just be consistent with it. Don't use with for a few different entries and then W/. That's confusing. Be consistent. Or if you have an example, E.G. is always a great alternative. Writing in paragraph format is also something that really flows better. And so I recommend having that. However, if you do want to write in point form, you definitely can. And what I mean by point form is not like bullet points. I mean, like for this one, for example, encourage a fun and challenging environment to assist players in learning and adapting. Then I put a semicolon. I ran practices, kept the team motivated during tough times. This still keeps that readability there and it still flows. But of course, if you have a paragraph format or if you can do paragraph format, it is a lot better. And again, these camera roles are important to incorporate, but you don't want to use the word communication or scholar directly. Things like active listening, building rapport, having a mutual understanding. These are all words that you can use because communication is not just verbal, it's also nonverbal. And you can do that same thing with scholar, right? Research, critical thinking, lifelong learner, etc. And so this is an example for UBC. And again, I caution you guys to not copy these. These are from actual applications. So you'll get flagged if you use wording here. Rather use these as a foundation and, things to model your answers after. So let's read through this one together. With 128 volunteers, I coordinated a united effort to raise awareness of brain injury prevention among 650 students in 34 elementary schools. Through hands-on demonstrations, example, watermelon helmet on Jello brains, and by sharing powerful concussion survival stories, we help students understand the importance of protective equipment in sports. Now, this is a great description. I think this is for UBC, so it's 350 characters about what they did. And the reason it's really good is because 128 volunteers, I coordinated a united effort, meaning that they led this group, right? Also, they helped 650 students across 34 elementary schools. That's important because I'm from Windsor. It's a relatively small city. I don't even think we have 34 elementary schools in Windsor. So if I'm reading this application, I'm thinking, wow, they helped that many people. That's almost bigger than my hometown city in terms of elementary school. So that's really powerful. I mean, they made an impact on that community. Also things like jello brains. These are imaginative words where I can almost imagine what a helmet on a jello brain would look like. If you weren't wearing a helmet, that jello brain would just splatter. um, and so, the specific details using strong verbs, metaphors, etc., are really important. um, and again, it was really concise and straight to the point, no fluff, just got right to what they wanted to say. And my second example here, this is entry one from for the first. Oh, I shouldn't really tell you here, but I had these are two separate entries, the same exact activity that I had. One was from the first time I applied, one was from the second time I applied. But let's look at the differences here, right? So the first thing is my title. So this is from the first time I applied. So I have U Windsor Organic Chemistry 2 leader. My second one, I have Organic Chemistry 2 Educational Session leader. Again, subtle differences. I don't really think that made a difference. Um, but I think the biggest difference here is in my description. So my first time I applied, I had led weekly virtual lectures to help students understand challenging topics, encourage teamwork, and a positive learning environment to promote engagement. In my second one, I put organized free lectures for students to grasp topics. I asked questions to promote critical thinking and guided students to support their development. The reason I think number two is better is because number one, I highlight the thing that it's free. These sessions were free to students on my campus. And so I didn't include that in my first time applying, which when I read back, I'm like, well, why did I include that? That was our main focus, is that these are free lectures to students that may not understand their course content. So I highlighted that. A second thing is I promoted critical thinking. Again, this goes back to the scholar Can role. So I was able to incorporate that, and I was able to mentor and guide students to support their development. That more so is like that leader role, helping students through that difficult journey. And not to say that this entry one is a bad description. This is just taking something that was already good and taking it to that next level through a few little tweaks here. And one thing I do want to mention is your hours should be above 60. 50 to 60, I think, is a good estimate. That's what someone told me when I was applying, is you don't want to have something under 50, because again, that goes towards your longitudinal commitment to certain activities. So always have it above 50 to 60. And some lessons learned. So this is more so focused for your Toronto and Schulich essays, but you don't want to pick generic lessons. I learned how to lead during times of distress. Of course, that's a lesson that someone may have learned, and it's a great lesson, but pick something that actually made you a better leader, a better person. And for me, as team captain of my basketball team, of course, learn how to be a leader. But there's so many aspects to being a leader. It's one big word, but 50 million branches off of it. So for me, I chose one that really I noticed when I was captain of that team, and that was learning the significance of celebrating small victories, right? And what is this in basketball? It's, great defense, great hustle, great rebound, and that continuous positive affirmations led our team to become closer. And that's an aspect of being a great leader. Another aspect of being a great leader is when I was a TA, I learned how to recognize my limits and know when to seek assistance. Again, in this case, being a leader doesn't mean knowing the answer every single time. It's knowing when to delegate and have that interdisciplinary collaboration, being able to rely on others that know more than you in certain areas or disease sites, etc., and relying on your colleagues. So I think different aspects of leadership and picking lessons that are truly nuanced and meaningful to you are important. And your verifiers. So make sure that your verifiers have good emails, not like Hotmail, Gmail, but official emails from their workplace or the university that they're associated with. It's really important to not use the same verifier for multiple activities. Make sure that you have a different verifier for each one. And so, again, contact your verifiers, send them your hours, send them your description. Make sure you both agree on this, because if there's a disagreement, it will only harm you in the application process. And then keep a document of your calculations, right? So just know how many hours you've done, and like your commitments per weeks, how many hours you work per day, etc. I think this is extremely important for especially British Columbia. They ask for this stuff. So make sure you have this as well. And so this MedApps program that I've been referencing through the PowerPoint here. So this is for all Canadian medical schools. I use it for Toronto just because I was in a pinch, and it was great for me. I was able to submit my essays. We had a meeting. They went over what they thought was impactful. It was actually a Toronto medical student as well, so they had experience going through that process, and they edited it. And I was able to get back, and it was a back and forth process over a few months. And what's great is, there's 3 edits here, but sometimes if you need a little bit more edits, the tutors are great and they're able to help you out and even, do a 4th or 5th edit or a final read over and give you the green light to apply. And they ensure that you're happy with it. It's not something that they're doing for you. It's something that you guys are doing together. And so you can send your drafts at any point, which I think is great. I mean, if you need 3 weeks to do your second draft, take the 3 weeks, make sure that your second draft is good and forward it over. And one of us will be able to help you out, regardless if it's your ABS, your Schulich essays, your Toronto essays, or if you're applying to other schools across Canada. We have medical students that will be able to help you out. And I definitely recommend it. It was just great to be able to speak to a medical student that's been through that process, knows what worked for them, and then is able to translate that to students like me and give back. And that was also part of the reason why I wanted to give back to, the Med Games program. And so when you're applying, you have to email Med Games, message the schools that you're interested in, include your GPA and just a very brief list of your extracurriculars. If you had any previous interviews at medical schools, that would be great. And it's really great to just have a mentor through this medical application process because it's so stressful. As you guys see, you have the MCAT because of Casper. Now you guys have applications to handle. It's a really rigorous process, and just having someone to debrief, someone that's been through it, someone that's been successful through it, is really comforting. So I definitely recommend this program, and it's extremely affordable compared to some of the other ones that are out there. And so one thing I do want to say before I oh wow, time's almost up. But you have to email Mud Games for sure. But start early, get your applications started now. You'd rather finish them a week early than be rushing the night before. So those are my thoughts and recommendations. And any questions, I mean, I can answer through the chat. And I know there's Q&A right now, but I'll be happy to answer any. And my email's at the beginning of the slide, which you'll get, and then I can answer any questions. So can I answer some of the questions in the chat, Satya? I know MedGames has been doing some, but
Yeah. Go ahead. I think it's if you can do so under 1 or 2 minutes, just as many questions as you can for sure.
sure. Yeah.
Typing about them as well.
Cool. Thanks, you. So if you started an activity as a child, you only count what you did since you were 16. That's a tough question. I know for me, I played piano, so I include that in my other section, and I include my hours since I was a kid. So, I mean, yeah, I didn't include that since I was 16. So it's important. I mean, for activities that are longitudinal, like basketball, I put that as a hobby for me as well, or playing piano. You include those, but like in terms of formal activities, you do want to include things that are more recent, right? Do you need a verifier for each activity? So yeah, you need a different one for each activity. It's recommended you do that. And we would not recommend having one verifier for 3 activities. That would it just is better to have different people speak on your candidacy. High school or graded? Graded, I feel like is a little bit too late. I mean, if you're a part of like a sports team in grade 8 and you continue that into high school, for sure mention it. But if it's something that you only did in grade 8, I feel like that would be too far of a stretch. I think a lot of medical schools require you to be 16 when you have a formal role in terms of being on a sports team, etc. High school for sure. I include all my high school things because I continue them over the 4 years. So I was 18, I think, when I graduated. So they were definitely fair play. The TMU Med School. I don't know much about the TMU Med School. They haven't released any information either. All I know is it's opening in October. I don't know if they're considering the MCAT. Maybe not. Maybe someone else here has more information for you, but I think that closer to the application open date, they will release some more information. But I definitely do know it opens early October. So you do have some more time, and it'll be after OMSAT, so you'll have that stress removed.
Yeah, I can add something for the TMU thing. So,
Yeah.
So they're not accredited yet. So they're technically only allowed to release their admission criteria once they're accredited. But all they have told so far is that they're not going to be requiring MCAT, and they're going to have what they say is an equitable GPA threshold. I don't know what that means, but yeah. And also their application is going to be, you may have said earlier there, Depend, it's not going to be with the other OMSAS applications. It's going to be, at least for this cycle, in October, as opposed to, it's going to open in October, as opposed to being due with other applications.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know. Thankfully it's after OMSAT, so you guys will have that relief off your shoulders here. And then I have another question here about what happens if the high school club members and teachers changed and we can no longer contact these verifiers. That's difficult. You may want to reach out to the school board and see if you're able to get a contact of them. But if there's other verifiers that do just have their Gmail or Hotmail accounts, you can definitely have their Gmail and Hotmail. One or two doesn't hurt, especially if they're people that or like for example, some of my basketball coaches weren't associated with any universities or etc. They're just normal people that wanted to help out. So it definitely is important to pick who you have, and if they have a Hotmail or Gmail, that's completely fine. Just make sure that you have more professional ones if possible. If you lost contact with your old supervisor and you literally have no one else that can verify the activity aside from family, then you sort of are at a dead end. I mean, if there's anyone still in the organization that knows of you or knows of the work you did, you can maybe include them. And I think sitting down and having a meeting with them and explaining what you did is really important. So then they could verify what you did beforehand if they are asked. Are high school ECs and awards looked down upon in any way, or are they equally preferred? I mean, I didn't know I wanted to do medicine in high school, so I was just enjoying life. So I didn't do many ECs, and I didn't have many awards aside from sports. But if you do have those things, that, like I said, that continued into university, I would definitely include those. If they're just a 1 year stint in high school, again, they may not be as impactful, right? Like quality over quantity if you're just trying to fill a box. So you really have to look at it from that holistic approach. So someone asked when I mentioned about how I sat down with my references and how I explained what ChemEd's role. So I'll give you an example. When I worked at the pharmacy, pharmacists are busy people, and the guy I knew was really personable, and he wanted to write me a reference. But to make his job a bit easier, I sat down and looked at the ChemEd's roles, and I provided examples of what I thought I did to exemplify those, like real life things that I did, whether it be empathizing with patients that didn't know the language well and taking the time to explain certain things like insurance to them or certain medications or navigating them through the appropriate channels. Those examples is what I mean by I sat down with them, I wrote them down, I explained what I did and how I did it, and it gave them a better idea. But again, he said it was helpful for him just because he didn't have to sit there and think back to every single time he worked with me. He can just draw upon those experiences. But every reference is different. Some references may just want to do it by themselves. I know one of my professors didn't ask me for anything, not even nothing. They just did it themselves. And so yeah. Yeah, so if you did a volunteering experience here, this is the last question, I think. If you did a volunteering experience in high school, and you were at a library for 3 years, I mean, that's a long one. And if you have accumulated a lot of hours, and you can write a lot about how that was impactful to you. And if that's something that really means a lot to you and contributed to you being a better person and a better applicant today, definitely include it. I mean, me being team captain of my basketball team was in high school. And so that was over my 4 years there, but I still included it. So yeah, and it was a big part of my interview as well. They talked about it, so I would include it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Depin. I think
Yeah,
yeah, so yeah, I think a lot of people really appreciated the depth you went into with all your answers. So so thanks a lot. And I think Ms. Khan is gonna go if she's ready. Just to answer a few more questions that are in the chat over here. I think someone asked if the programs, Med Games programs, are free or not. So we do try to make it as equitable as possible, so as affordable. We know that all of you are students, you may not be working full time and all this, so we try to make it as affordable as possible. Unfortunately, we cannot make it free as much as we would like to, just because we pay our tutors as well, right? So that's why it's not completely free. Our next speaker is going to go over just a rough cost of what our programs may cost as well. So hopefully that's helpful to you there as well. So for whoever asked that. Do we need verifiers for the awards section? I to be honest, I don't remember.
Yes. Yes, you do.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So I think Muskan is going to go. A PhD student at the University of Toronto, and I believe she's here. Awesome.
Hi, Safia.
Adina,
Can
are
you
you
hear me
here?
okay? Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, I can see Adina here. Can't hear her yet. Let's just wait for a few seconds.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Perfect. Are
Okay,
you
perfect. I
are
need
you
to start my video. I'm not exactly sure how to do it,
okay?
but
Are you able to share your screen? Do you
yeah, for sure, for sure.
okay. For your video. Oh, interesting. Because it does show something.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. Can you see the slides though?
Yeah, I
Is
can
that
see
fine?
the slides. Yeah, I can see the slides.
Okay, that's good at least.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, you can go ahead whenever you can.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, like that I'm not. I'll try to figure it out soon though.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. So I'm Adina, and I'm going to start my MD PhD at the University of Toronto in the fall. And I'm going to talk to you today about kind of how I got there, kind of what happened, what I did, and really how everything kind of worked out. So I'm excited to be here today, and yeah, let's get started. So a bit of background about me. Here's kind of how I started getting into research because it was really a longitudinal process for me. It wasn't just one day I kind of decided, okay, this is what I want to do. It was kind of really a long time coming. So when I was in grade 10, I wasn't really sure what to do one summer, and someone recommended that since I'm interested in science, I might as well, do something with science. So I went to the Helix Summer Science Institute. It was at York University, which is in Toronto. And I did 6 weeks there. Each week was a different kind of course. And I honestly loved it. We learned a lot of research techniques. I remember that's when I did my first PCR, and it was absolutely awesome. Like I knew that I didn't really know what research entailed, but I knew that I liked the techniques that I was learning and that I would want to continue to use them. So in the pictures, I was dissecting a pig intestine. And another skill that I got at that program was how to present, because I didn't know that that would be such a big part of research, presenting your work, but it is. And that was a really valuable skill that I got that program too. So I knew I really liked science and I did have an interest in medicine, but I wasn't really sure where I was going to go with that until next summer. I knew I liked research and I was kind of like, maybe I should, try to research. And I did find a lab at University Health Network, which is in downtown Toronto. And I researched acute myeloid leukemia, which is a type of blood cancer. I did like a synergy project. It was kind of like you looked at how two drugs interacted with each other to help decrease properties of the leukemia cells. And honestly, it was unreal. The stuff I learned, I progressed so much in such a short amount of time. Like stuff that I didn't even know was possible became possible for me that summer. The other big thing that happened at UHN was that I met clinician scientists. I didn't even know that a clinician scientist was a real job until I was actually at UHN, and there were a couple of MD PhD students there too. And I was pretty curious, so I asked a bunch of questions, kind of what the job entailed, what being an MD PhD student was. And I really liked what I heard, and I decided I'm not going to make a decision, well, right then and there. I mean, I was 17, but I thought that if nothing really changed my opinion on how I felt about science, how I felt about research, then you know what, maybe we can try to go for this. I still didn't like take it too seriously, but I knew that like I could keep this in the back of my mind and that I for sure wanted to do something with science. So I went to the university. I don't know why it's not clicking. Okay. I went to the University of Guelph, and what was great about Guelph is that it's a really research intensive school. Like by the time I was in my second year, I emailed a bunch of professors and I got involved in a lab that looked at molecular and cellular neuroscience in the fall of 2021. So here's a bunch of pictures from all the stuff I get to research. Honestly, every day in the lab was really great. I always learned something new, which I really appreciated. I did stuff like Western blots, which are in the top left. You can see a picture of my cells on the top right, and a couple of the assays, like the tests I did on cells, were scratch and spheroid assays, which help us show the properties of the cells. And glioblastoma multiforme, which is the type of brain cancer. So I really, really enjoyed my research at Guelph. So it kind of just reinforced that research was something I wanted to do and that I really liked looking at clinical phenotypes. So the way that the cancer cells actually moved based on the treatments we were giving them. Also at Guelph, what was great was that I got to take specialized courses. So in fourth year, I did a research project where I got to present my research at undergrad seminars. And I also got to present a poster at a conference a few months back. And what was great was that I just got so many opportunities through being in a lab. I really liked the lab environment, all the stuff that I was doing, like interested me, and I looked forward to being in the lab every day. So I knew that I definitely did want to do research. However, at the same time, my interest in my courses remained very strong. I knew that I really still wanted to go for medicine as well, but I didn't really think I could choose. I couldn't really see one without the other. I wanted to research a specific disease to be able to help those patients with the disease in both clinical practice and in my research. So it was really that type of combination that convinced me that I would try to apply to MD PhD, see what happened. If not, I would continue with a master's. I mean, I loved research, so there was always that type of option. The other big piece at Guelph is actually pretty random, but I'm a synchronized swimmer and I absolutely love synchro and competing with my team. That's my team on the left at nationals this past March. I also served on the exec board of the synchro team. So yeah, go Griffins. And I think what happened with swim was that it really helped. Well, it helped keep me sane, obviously, with all my school and my research, but swim gave me such a great outlet, but it also gave me something really great to talk about on my applications, which we'll get to. So that's the one thing, is to find something that you really, really like, and it'll really benefit you in the future on these applications, because the more something means to you, the easier it is to talk about, which will be easier to help articulate your story on your applications. So a bit about applying to MD PhD, because it is a little more of a hefty process than your general med applications. So the first thing is that it's all in addition to your med stuff. For some medical schools, you submit your MCAT score. For some, you don't need an MCAT score, but you need to indicate special things on your autobiographical sketch. It's different for every school, but MD PhD always needs an additional something. So I think for every school, you do need the personal statement or the letter of intent. For each school, it is different, and that's something I'll keep reiterating. But for each school, they're going to want maybe a different take on your story. It's all going to be kind of the same idea, but what might happen is a school will frame something as describe your interest in research, and another school will be like describe your research accomplishments. So same ballpark, but like a little different. So in the personal statements, I tried to focus on generally my story, what got me into research and medicine, and what my research interests were, and kind of how that all connected. The other thing that is needed in addition to med applications is an academic CV. It's for U of T only, but it is in addition to all this other stuff. The academic CV wasn't too bad. It was actually pretty guided. They give you an example template of how to put everything. It really wasn't too bad. You kind of just gotta organize all of your stuff into it. And it really looks at different types of accomplishments, like academic accomplishments, research accomplishments. I think there's some extracurricular accomplishments, but that document really guides you through it. It's just something you've got to do. The last thing, which was a little difficult, I mean, for me personally, was to get additional references, because you do need 3 for med, but for some schools you need either an additional 2, additional 3. I'm not sure what the policy was on using the same references that you could for med, but you definitely do need those additional references to help with your application. Most of the time they actually want them, and they say specifically that they want them from an advisor, like someone who you've researched with. For example, a PhD student that you've worked with, a principal investigator, or a professor that you've worked with. And all of this stuff will help shape your application. So one thing that I did that actually really helped me during the application process was to look at, well, OMSAS for Ontario, but there are MD PhD programs all across Canada, and look at each school's specific application requirements for MD PhD. Each school will likely have a page on their medicine website that talks about MD PhD, kind of what they want in applications to the program. And I made a list of everything. I think I had a sheet of paper per school, and I wrote down every single thing that school wanted, no matter how big or how small. And as I went through that, I checked it all off and like organized it into folders on my computer. So that come like the couple days before I submitted my applications, I wasn't super stressed, because I knew I had gone through my checklist and had everything done. Like, it can definitely be overwhelming. Because you're applying to an additional program on top of the regular med program, which is definitely not an easy feat at all. But I think what really helped me through this period was being able to talk about my research, which I was super passionate about. I've been researching for about 5 years at that point, I think. And it was just such a huge part of my life that I was excited to really share on my application. So feeling that way really helped me get through it all. Okay, so MD PhD interviews like, if you're getting interviews, they always come with a bunch of different question types. Most of the med interviews have the question types, so we're actually going to go through them because we're going to talk about how to interview. So these question types are personal, ethics, policy, a quote, a creative question, or role play. Something that's actually interesting is that on the University of Toronto application, you have to fill out these 2 questions for the med application. And often you'll see these types of question categories integrated into those 2 questions. I think for mine, we had a quote and a creative one. And I think the best advice I can give for that is to just let your story shine. I think I talked about swim for one of the questions and used a personal story for the other. And it was easy to talk about that kind of stuff. So I did, but even understanding the types of questions that they can ask in an interview, and how to process those can help you also with your applications. So with these 6 categories of questions, something really important to remember are these CanMed's roles. Definitely Google them, become familiar with a couple of them, because in every question, you're going to want to link it back to these roles that they have, because that's going to show them that you have the qualities that they want for a medical student. So we're actually going to go into some of these question types, the first one being ethics. So when you get an ethics question in an interview, it can be like stuff about morals, maybe questions about lying, stealing, cheating predicaments, stuff like that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is always structure your answer. At least I think in all the interviews, you'll have some time before to, kind of jot that down. So by remembering the structure, you can kind of have that going in your head and be able to think about what the first steps should be, and then keep going based on that. So you always want to talk about who's affected first to show that you read the scenario, you understood the scenario, and now you're going to talk about it. And then you list the pros of whatever side and cons of the other. And then you have to decide, you have to give a stance. You shouldn't be. The last part is a personal example, future directions. This part I think is super, super important to remember because medical schools, I think, really like to hear a personal story, really like to get to know you. They will obviously appreciate your answer to the question, but by connecting it to either those can med roles, an example, really wraps up your answer in a nice way and will help you stand out. So, policy questions. There are two different types, one where there is a policy given and one where there's not a policy given. So when there is no policy given, you really got to think backwards, think about the causes, impacts of the policy, and then possibly solutions. And then you also always make sure to give that personal or world example. The thing to remember about these types of questions is that by giving 3 kind of points, like maybe 3 points for the causes, 3 points for the impacts, 3 points for the solutions, and then wrapping it up with a personal world example, shows that you're really thinking things through and that you're really understanding their question, you have a lot of ideas, and you know how to share them in a really cohesive way. So when there is a policy given, it's similar-ish to the ethics question, but you will do pros, then cons, you'll show your stance, and alternate solutions are really cool because you're showing how you can think in a different way that can possibly be different. And you also always personal example or a world example to help you stand out. I always remembered 3 pros and 3 cons is important, and to make sure when I had the time before my interview questions to jot those down to make sure that I had stuff to talk about. Okay. So the quote and creative question structures were probably my personal favorite type of question because I got to, think outside the box and it wasn't super structured, but I liked the quote questions because you could really read into it however you wanted, and a creative question you can take however you'd like. So when you get something like a quote, I remember in my interview, I had one about leadership something, but you define kind of what the quote says and explain your stance on it. So I talked about why the quote kind of said what it said and why I think it should be giving this type of message. And then I got to give a personal example. I think I went with swim for that one, with leadership. And if there is an issue with the quote, something you find that should be altered, you then correct the quote, give your alternate opinion, and then of course, like link it to medicine. For example, I think when I talked about swim, I would talk about how I was a captain for like a couple seasons, and I would say that like by being able to work as a team, you work with a variety of people in the medical profession. It's not just you alone. You work with nurses, other members of the healthcare team, and that's super important in order to be a good leader, or something like that. But by being able to link your personal experiences to the medical world, they're able to see that you have the skills that you need to become a medical student, which is what they're looking for, especially in an interview. All right, personal questions were also pretty cool because you get to talk about personal stories, which was always the easiest for me. In these types of questions, you would use the STAR method. It's a cool acronym, so you get to remember that. So I just talked about situation, then task, then action, then result. I remember I got a question that was something like, describe a time where you advocated for change, but then wasn't successful. So I talked about a situation, task, action, result. And then also I went into what I learned and how would I either avoid or try to improve on my actions in the situation next time, which does help you stand out because by being able to reflect on your abilities and being able to step back and think about how you could do something in a different way is also very, very critical and critical thinking that medical schools would like to see. And also by ending it with how you empowered others and how maybe next time you would do something different and how that would create a positive impact would also really, really help you stand out because you're thinking about other people. You're not just thinking about how you alter your own behavior, but how your behavior instead would help others. So I can only talk about the U of T interview experience because that was the only place I interviewed, but the MPI, which is the modified personal interview, is the interview style that the University of Toronto uses. And the MPI is different from MMI because there's less role-playing scenarios. They talk about a little more personal questions. But if you are interviewing for MD PhD, you will have 2 interviews. So my first interview was my MD one. It was 4 questions, asynchronous, which means like I was sitting there just talking to a screen. No one else was there. No one else was around. You get 2 minutes before each question to write down you get the question, then you get 2 minutes to write stuff down. You answer for 5 minutes, and then the cycle repeats again. But during those 2 minutes, I always had a plan. Like, what should I do? How should I like structure my answers? So because I was able to learn those types of questions and the structures of how to answer those questions, I was able to use those 2 minutes in the most effective way possible, so that I had my thoughts organized by the time those 5 minutes started. The med interview really was fine. It didn't take very long because it was just 4 questions, 5 minutes. I think the key to that was to honestly breathe and to remember that you've practiced and you'll be able to do it. And the best you can do is just write what you can and then give them your best. So the next part was the PhD interview, which was interesting because they were synchronous sessions, which meant you actually talk to someone. It was over Zoom, not Zoom, but like their online platform. And you talk to each person for 10 minutes. It was faculty members from the university, and each section focused on a different part of either research or or the role of a clinician scientist. I was asked about my research interests a lot, my personal experiences, my personal research experiences, why I would be ready to be an MD PhD, and what the role of a clinician scientist entails. I think it's really important to be sure that you know what type of what a clinician scientist does. That was something that kind of threw me a little, because you think of that, yeah, I want to research, I want to do medicine, but you don't really think about exactly how to define that sort of role to someone, which was really interesting. So these interviews were on 2 separate days, and both were, they went. You have MD or MD PhD students there with you to kind of guide you through. And yeah, so that's how the interviews went. Pretty nerve-wracking, but by remembering to like breathe and remembering to trust your practice, I do that in swim. I did that with my interviews, and it really helped. So here are some recommendations from Med Games on what to do with interviewing. So always have your personal stories ready to go. For my main ones were swim, research, a couple other extracurriculars I did. And I had them linked to the CanMeds roles. I also had them linked, this is very U of T specific, but U of T has these 4 clusters. I think it's scholar, advocate. I'm not sure what the other 2 are, but stuff like that. So I had my examples linked to the expectations and the goals of the school. Does someone have a question? Oh, okay, never mind. So I had those ready to go, and I had them linked to the school's expectations. So I think this could go for any school, but to understand like what their curriculum is known for, what kind of stuff they do in their curriculum, what they talk about in their med program is something really important to gear your personal stories towards what the school wants to look for. So something that really actually took me a long time to learn was how to talk properly, and to be sure that my body language, that I'm not like moving awkwardly, or that I'm talking in full sentences, and that I'm actually something I was so sorry, I just did it but something I was so bad at was stopping in the middle of a sentence and then starting a new one. So it was actually my cousin, she's in speech. She taught me how to end my sentences with a period while I'm talking and pause for like a second and then continue in the next one. And it really helped make my answers a lot more clear. So during conversations, I would ask people to make sure I'm not doing any of those kind of interruptions or stuff that would make my sentences seem choppy or my body language seem awkward. I also practiced smiling, as weird as it sounds, but that helped me be able to keep calm during the interview because I could just smile at the screen. No one was smiling back at me unless it was the faculty members, but it also really helped make your presence brighter. And because you don't want to look miserable while you're interviewing, that's just, you don't want to be sad because you're happy to be interviewing. So another thing I did was get knowledge about ethics. I read this book. I forget what the book was called. It might be Doing Good or something. I don't know, but if I find the authors, I can in huge in huge letters, practice, practice, of course. The more you practice, the more confident you will become when you're answering interview questions. I remember a couple of things I did was to sit in front of my camera and literally just talk to myself and try to answer practice questions. I would have my friends help me interview, have lists of questions that I would try to rehearse. I would try to do set 2-minute timers with a question and just prep what I'd write and stuff like that. I in swim and we do these things called pressure sets. Like you have to get yourself ready to be in that competition immediately. So I tried to do, well, pressure sets. Like I tried to imitate what my interview would be like. And the last thing is to seek professional help if it suits your needs. It definitely suited my needs because I was so lost with interviewing for MD PhD. I hadn't really known many people who had interviewed for MD PhD except for the people I met at the lab back at UHN. And while they were super helpful with advice, they had interviewed the first year the MPI actually was instated at the University of Toronto. So things had been a little updated since then. So I did the interview program at Med Games. Muskan coached me through my MD interview and my PhD interview, and it really made such a huge difference for me and my confidence going into the interview. So in Med Games interview programs, there's some information about it on the left, like who to email, where to look for it. But they don't just do MPI programs, they also do MMI, panel interviews, which other schools use. And what I really liked about the program was that it gave me such specific feedback for my answers that I really learned what mistakes to correct and corrected them really quickly. Like I was able to see exactly what I was doing wrong after every question, and really I was guided through answering some of those really high yield questions that you'll see in interviews, and I was able to become really good at them through this coaching. So I would highly recommend the program if that's something you're interested in, because it helped with my confidence, it helped with my skills, and especially because I had no clue what I was doing. I just knew I needed to practice. It really helped. So the last thing is about kind of how it was possible. Obviously, the interview program was a big part, but even before that, you need to be having fun. To become a clinician scientist, obviously, it's a ton of work. You're just signing up for 2 careers at once. So I decided that if I wasn't having fun, I wasn't going to do it. And you need people beside you who will help you get there. You may feel alone during this process because not significantly less people apply to MD PhD than they do to MD. So it was definitely, you feel a little lonely, but you're not alone. You shouldn't feel alone. So that's on the left, that's me in my lab coat, having fun in the lab. Don't know why I was wearing sunglasses, but every day in the lab was fun, which just ensured me that this was the career that I wanted to be in. I also had great people around me. In the middle, it's the PhD student I worked with, Jen. She really became like an older sister to me. She taught me so much about research and was one of my references for Toronto. And I knew that she would be there for really any of my needs, and it helped so much through the applications. And lastly is my teammates, because swim kept me sane and it really helped have those stories for my application. And I just knew that this was the path I wanted to go on, and that if I was smiling, then I was doing something right. So thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry my camera's not working, but what can you do? So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And also, like, that's my email. So feel free to send me whatever. I'm happy to help. I know this is a crazy process, so I'm happy that I'll be able to help you guys with it if you want. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation and for sharing all of your experiences and your journey. I think that inspired a lot of people, and I'm sure you will have questions. I'm sure you'll get emails with a ton of questions about it. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Does anyone, I'm trying to see in the chat if anyone has any questions. I don't see anything as of now, but we can give it for a few minutes. Then we'll see if there are any other questions. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions for Adina here, but yeah, thank you so much. Our next presenter is going to be Fiona, who's a med student at UBC, and she's going to be talking about our UBC interview programs. Although this is like it's titled a UBC interview program, there's a lot of interview specific sort of information that is presented in this in this session over here. Personally, I did not interview at UBC, but I wanted to prepare with people who were not interviewing at the same school that I was interviewing. I wanted to interview with people. I want to interview prep with people who I'm not competing with. I don't know whether that was a good idea or not. So although I wasn't interviewing at UBC, I did actually attend the UBC interview program, and that gave me very valuable preparation as well. So this is a session that I think can be useful for a lot of us here, even if you are not applying to UBC. So I think if Fiona is here, she can share her screen and we can get started with that.
Yeah, hello everyone. One sec, I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, just making sure you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for having me today. So my name's Fiona. I am now an MSI 2 at the UBC MD program. So yeah, I've moved over from Toronto where I did my undergrad and have been in Vancouver at UBC for the past year, and it's been very, very lovely, and I'm really happy to be sharing about the UBC program hosted by Med Games that I undergo to, which really helped in my journey of getting into UBC Med, I guess a year ago now, which is so insane. But yeah, so essentially, the UBC Med application system, just like OMSASC or any of the other systems you've heard about in the previous presenter slides, is quite similar. UBC does have their own sort of system called OAS, and essentially it's this online application system that is kind of organized by headings, and it's quite easy to kind of navigate through. Yeah, pretty similar to what you've seen before from OMSASC, so nothing too crazy there. So yeah, so like I said before, looking at OAS, there is essentially everything you need is on the left-hand panel here. So they'll tell you, you just kind of go through in a chronological order, and then it'll give you a green check every time you finish stuff. They also have like this really awesome UBC kind of application guide that they post every year and update every year. I mean, I think from helping people write applications and writing them myself, it hasn't really changed since I've applied to UBC. But yeah, it's really helpful, and I do recommend everyone who wants to apply to UBC to read through it. But yeah, it gives you like all the deadlines, documents you need for each section. So it's really helpful, and I do recommend everyone look at that and then obviously give themselves a lot of time to write the application and kind of and also give themselves about 2 weeks, I would say, for response rate for your verifiers to verify your all of your non-academic activities and whatnot that requires verifiers. So yeah, so just some UBC Med application tips. So yeah, you do want to be very specific as to what you're describing. I always think it's really a good use of space too, to kind of give like quantitative time and like dates and numbers of how much you did something. So kind of like you know, talk about like, oh, I've helped um 256 students in X amount of schools doing being a teaching assistant. Always talk about like the audience you're helping. So if you've helped, you know, especially an audience that is usually marginalized or underserved populations, I think that would be really helpful to highlight, and then kind of talk about the goals you've accomplished and then describe how you've done it. I know it seems like a lot to put in one space, but once you kind of get good at like a framework, it does get a lot easier. And then on the next slide, I've kind of showed you, kind of took a screenshot of an Excel I've created to kind of make sure that I'm within the word limit of each entry, and also have like the verifier that I allotted to each entry. But yeah, anyways, I'll go through that once I get to the next slide. And then yeah, Canadian med schools typically don't like to hear how you're like a doctor or what you've learned from it. I feel like that is it it's giving what we call in med school like gunner energy, and that's not necessarily what med schools and the application people who read their application want to hear. They want to hear who you are and who you are as a person, and why you would be a good doctor, but not but they don't want it to be too specific to medicine. And they also really wouldn't want you to talk about any shadowing experiences or anything like that either. Yeah, I definitely recommend to the third point. It's really important. I've done it a lot too. Definitely look over the CanMed's competencies and kind of look at their keywords that they use within each competency and weave those words into your descriptions, because as someone that will be reviewing your application, they will have the CanMeds in mind. And when you use words that they use in CanMeds, it really would highlight how you are fulfilling those CanMed competencies that they're looking for in an applicant. So yeah, the link of the CanMeds is linked here. So you do want to subtly incorporate this into your description. So for example, if you're talking about communicating, being a good communicator would mean building rapport, having a mutual understanding of the situation, being an active listener, respecting for diversity, and being culturally having cultural humility and having cultural sensitivity, how to set goals and expectations. Yeah, again, like how you don't want to like kind of be so like specific to medicine in your descriptions. Also try not to be too explicit. Like don't have your whole description be all CanMed buzzwords, but definitely do try to incorporate a little bit of those words when you're describing what you're doing. And then yeah, if there are some activities where you've done a lot of tasks, especially with activities that you've done for many, many years, it is important to include kind of the more longitudinal or meaningful projects that you have worked for in that activity. And then if you want to, you can break, if you feel like you've done a lot for a certain activity, you can break it into 2 entries. Keeping in mind that you do have a limited amount of entries that you can put with the UBC application, and then just ensure that your verifiers can verify each activity that you're doing and all of that. For instance, if you did 2 separate studies for one lab, you can include 2 separate entries, one supervisor for one of them, and then another grad student or a postdoc that you were working with closely to verify for another. And then for myself, like I said, in the next slide, I'll kind of go over the Excel I use. But I think what I did was I wrote out my description and I actually emailed all of my verifiers the like the description that I put in the UBC application, because in the event that they're gonna get emailed or called to be verifying for you, they'll be getting that information anyway. So for me, I wanted to be really transparent and then kind of, make sure that I had all my ducks in a row before I submitted my application, that everybody that I wrote down to verify for me were happy with my description, so that I gave enough time that if they weren't really happy or didn't agree with what I described I did, that they can tell me, and then we can have that open and honest communication before I submitted my application. And then, you don't want them to have any like surprises, obviously, and then like the worst case scenario not verify for you. So I think that really helped alleviate a lot of like application anxiety for me, and it was like a really good way to make sure all of my ducks in a row before submitting. And then yeah, the last point is really important. I think, yeah, don't underestimate your non-traditional extracurriculars. Honestly, I think those are the ones that kind of highlight who you are as a person, and beyond being a healthcare professional, because people that are reading your applications want to know that you are someone that's well-rounded and that also would have a work-life balance, and won't like necessarily be prone to physician burnout because you enjoy things like traveling, learning things and whatnot. Um, sorry. Okay. Anyways, I'll continue. So yeah, I would say definitely talk about your non-traditional extracurriculars. They're definitely what set you apart from other people, and they do really help paint that full story. Moving on to the screenshot I was telling you all about. So yeah, I kind of made like a big Excel sheet, kind of having like the heading of each specific section of the UBC application. I wrote down like what I did, and then kind of like wrote down the description. I even had like a little word counter to make sure I was like within the word counter, the verifier, and then like if they responded, I even wrote out like my time references. This part I want to highlight. I applied to UBC twice, and the first time I applied, the time references section, I kind of ballparked how much time I spent in an activity and didn't really give specifics. And I felt that that may have probably been a detriment in my application, because like for example, I was a varsity athlete for a lot of years, and like when you ballpark how long you've done, it doesn't really paint the full picture. Like when I did what I did here, talk about like how many days a week I trained and how many hours I trained per day and all of that, I think it really painted the picture better, and it was more specific and shows kind of, I guess, even gives more like validity as to like what you did in that application. So I would say definitely don't take the time reference portion of the application lightly. I know it sounds silly, but definitely it was something that I think really helped strengthen my application the second time I applied. So yeah, I definitely think having like an Excel where you kind of organize everything was helpful, and it especially helped me too when I was emailing all my verifiers to make sure they were okay with verifying for me before I submitted my application as well. Yeah, so now talking about the UBC Med interview program that I also took part in the second time that I applied, which I was successful for. So essentially, it's a program where you have 3 group sessions in Sunday evenings that were 2 hours long with a Med Games instructor. And they also gave you a one-on-one session kind of before and after those group sessions, kind of just to like check in and kind of work with you personally to see how much what you need to work on, and those were really helpful too. And I actually found the group sessions like really enlightening, kind of seeing other people answer prompts and stuff. It kind of like inspired me to, kind of organize specific prompts in certain ways that I felt were a little bit better. And it was like just kind of nice to be in a community to kind of like support each other as well. And then we also got like a buddy system where we were able to kind of like practice with each other with resource provided by the instructor. So yeah, the program itself was amazing, and I think it really helped me the month before I actually interviewed, because having all of those sessions, it like when by the time I interviewed, I honestly felt like it was just like another session with the UBC Med interview program from MedGame. So honestly, it was really awesome. Everything was held over Zoom, which was exactly the same platform as UBC uses, so that's good as well. They're all recorded, so if you wanted to go back and see how other people responded to certain prompts, or how you responded yourself, to kind of like, it's super awkward watching yourself on a recording, and I personally hated it, but it was the thing that kind of helped me the most to see like how I could further see all of like the little quirks that I did that you won't really notice when you don't record yourself. So that was really helpful as well. There was a lot of content covered in this program, strategies as to how to answer specific types of prompts that would come up. Like for example, there are more creative ones with like quotes and like pictures that you get with the UBC med interviews, or there's also like policy ones that you have to do. So yeah, it was definitely really helpful to kind of go through like a sort of structure to have when answering those. And then obviously practicing was the most important part, and then also having the feedback from the instructor was very important as well. And yeah, you also get free priority registration to all the interview seminars. So I went to both of these seminars. Actually, the high yield ethics seminar was really, really helpful. And the ethics questions that arise were very similar, that they talked about were really similar to the ones that I encountered in the both times that I interviewed with UBC Med, and also with other med schools I've interviewed with in Canada as well. And then the CADMed seminar also really helpful too, to kind of go over how you, similar to your application, how you kind of weave in your I guess the CADMED's competencies into languaging when you're interviewing as well. And the number of students is like a very small group, which was really conducive, because of the limited spots, it was actually really nice to have a small group to kind of build that community off of. So it wasn't too overwhelming, and it was a nice group that you kind of got to know through the months, and of course you have a buddy. So it was just really nice to have that kind of community of support. And honestly, some of the people in the UBC Med interview program I still keep in touch with. Some of them are in my UBC Med cohort, and then some of them are in other med schools. So we always keep in touch, and it's just such a nice community to have, honestly, even beyond getting into med and being a med, and now that we're all med students, kind of just sharing and having that community there as well. And then yeah, so we'll be updating how many spots are left on the Instagram story. So definitely follow the MedGames.org Instagram page to kind of know further, and also email the MedGames Gmail to have further information on the sessions and payment. But of course, recognize that registration is on a first come, first served basis. And then yeah, so like I talked about, the Med interview program is just peer practice groups that kind of enable you to prepare on your own schedule. So yeah, my buddy, I at the time was still in Toronto, finishing up my studies there, and she was here in BC. Even though with the 3 hour time difference, we were able to kind of just come up with certain times, and it didn't have to be anything crazy, like, in between classes with like 30 minutes, we just like do a couple prompts each, give feedback, and kind of do a similar format that we were taught in our group sessions with the instructor. And I felt that was really helpful. Like honestly, just little bits and pieces here and there. It didn't have to be like long 2 hour sessions each time. But just like practicing whenever you can to really helped, build that interview confidence when it came to interview time, which I found really successful. And yeah, I really felt that this program was really it like was really kind of the holy grail for me getting into UBC Med. So I'm definitely so grateful that I was able to undergo it with Med Games. And then yeah, so I talked about the ethics seminar, which I said was really important. So what was included in this program is this ethics seminar, and it include topics such as, AI in medical care, which obviously is really prevalent nowadays. Really like kind of heavy subjects like MAID and how you kind of undergo talking about that, burnout, rural health, which UBC we're very passionate about rural and indigenous medicine. So for us, like it is something that UBC really highly highly regard. So yeah, that was like very, very helpful to go through in the ethics seminar. And then yeah, of course, this can also be purchased without the med interview program for a cost. But if you're in the med interview program, you kind of it's all inclusive. So yeah, these are just these two screenshots are just kind of the topics that we go through. And yeah, it was like a very great like Sparks Notes type of version of all the topics you go through. Very, very helpful, and I highly recommend this seminar. Another seminar, like I talked about, was the Premed Seminar, included with the med interview program as well. So, you know, there are 6 Premeds, all encompassing with being a medical expert, and kind of like talked in the seminar, talked about what each of those are, reflected on good and not so good examples of each, you know, learn how to structure your responses and kind of weave in like certain keywords or how to show that you are like demonstrating these ChemEd competencies within ChemEd questions. And there was also opportunities for questions and to receive and give feedback. So again, similar to the ethics seminar, this can be purchased without the med interview program, but if you do the med interview program, it is inclusive in it, and you are like the priority when it comes to registering for the seminar as well. So also a very important seminar that I would recommend as well. Yeah, so the final word is just like, you know, when preparing with payers and receiving feedback from medical students and advisors are extremely, extremely valuable. You know, like it's only been 1 year since I've also been in the same shoes, you know, applying to med school and stuff. So like, you know, doing this doing this before and applying multiple times, and you know, having that lived experience, but also being on the other end of things and helping some people get in now. It's really highly valuable for you to kind of connect with us, and also, you know, build those connections for when you do get into med school. You know, you kind of have those mentors already. So, you know, this is like a very like awesome program to not only be successful in your application, but also be successful in building some friendships and connections that can help you along your med school journey beyond getting into med school. So yeah, the UBC Med Interview Program has a very successful track record in supporting students. I know in my group, I think there was 3 to 4 of us in our small group that I think got into UBC Med. So including myself. So yeah, we're all friends to this day, and it's really cool to be in the same cohort and whatnot. So yeah, I really recommend this program, and I really enjoyed it when I did it. So yeah, I think that's it for me. I'll stop sharing and return to the main screen. If anyone has questions, please feel free to ask them now. Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting some direct messages, but I can pass the floor back to you.
Okay, perfect. I mean, if there are any questions that are coming up in your direct messages, feel free to answer them.
Yeah, for sure. Hey Raj. So yeah, Raj is just asking if you can DM me. Yeah, you can DM me for sure. Here. Let me just I'll put my email. Um, all right, just writing my email down. Also put my Instagram down, I guess, in the easier. Sorry, I'm just getting another question here.
Is it okay if I post your email on like the general group chat?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry, I think I posted in the general group chat. I just realized I did a direct message. I'm so sorry. So E said, do you think the application system will change if the implementation of Workday? That is a really good question. Yeah, I just recently got on Workday as well. To my knowledge, I don't think so, but don't quote me on it. We also just got an email about Workday, so I have no idea how that will change. But you know, even if it does change, I'm pretty sure it will be the similar format with like all the same sort of information. And like I said, the interview guide that they post every year is like your like best friend. Like I refer to that while I was writing my descriptions, while I was doing verifiers, and even going on towards getting an interview and preparing for interviews. So I will definitely look at that review if things were to change. But to my knowledge, I would assume that they would just stick to the same OAS sort of system, because I don't think it was similar. But yeah, don't quote me on it. Sorry, I'm not the most sure about it. They don't really tell us much about that sort of thing. Okay, I have another question. So, Mary saying which is costing me. Would you say the cost is simply more doing? Sorry, Hoden. Just to follow up on your question, you mean as in like tuition or like the preparation for interviews or just like overall costs of being a out of province, like living abroad or kind of like not abroad, sorry, like living like not living at home, do you mean like the cost of living in Vancouver? Yeah, anyways, once you follow up, overall. Okay, yeah, overall, I think, yeah, well, I mean, so with UBC Med, there are four sites. So we have Vancouver, the Vancouver site, and then we have a site on the island in Victoria. We have a site in the Innerland, I guess they call it Okanagan in like UBCO, so Kelowna, and then we have a northern site in Prince George. So if you're in the distributed sites, not in Vancouver, it's definitely cheaper because Vancouver is really expensive. I moved to Vancouver from Toronto, and it is actually more expensive to live here than Toronto, which I was shocked about because when I was living in Toronto, I thought it was so expensive there. Because originally I'm from the Northwest Territory, so I moved to Toronto for my undergrad and then moved here for med school. So yeah, it is like really expensive. If you live at home now in Ontario, it'll definitely be a big cost. Tuition, I think, is around the same as the other medical schools around Canada. So that's kind of similar. But yeah, I would say if you're an out of province student, you're gonna have to rent and it will be expensive. And of course, like I live in a two bed, two bath, and for context, I pay like almost 2K a month, including like my utilities, and all of that. So yeah, it is really expensive. I mean, I do live really close to campus, like just off campus, because UBC Med, we pretty much have class 8 to 5 every day. If not like at UBC, usually we're at the hospital. So yeah, I would recommend if you do get into UBC, live closer to campus for your first year. But I guess that's something you can decide if you get in and all of that stuff. And then I have another question. Oh, sorry. The Workday implementation is just essentially uh just a new like system that UBC not just UBC Med but UBC overall is doing in terms of like I guess it's just kind of like your Canvas. I don't know what you guys use wherever school you were at, but at U of T we use like Quarkus or Canvas, so it's essentially that just like the platform used for like paying your fees and to organize yourself within the institution. They just change it up this year and that's what that is. Yeah, nothing crazy. Yeah, and I think that's all the questions. Please let me know if I missed any. But yeah, if that's but if please feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram if you have any more questions about UBC Med. I guess I'm going into my second year, so I'm quite fresh off of first year and definitely help some people with interview prepping and also some application reviews as well. So I'm really happy to answer any questions for UBC Med. Sorry, I'm just getting a question here. I'm committing when I started university, so I need to work. I plan to get my sorry, someone's just asking me a specific prompt. Yeah, I don't necessarily think it would look bad in your application. M.E, who I'm just responding to you right now. In regards to your yeah, longitudinal time commitment. I don't think so at all. I think, in like I said, don't sleep on the time clarification block. You can even write in the time clarification block if within your word count you can just like talk about like why you start or stopped a certain thing. And if you working somewhere for 3 years is like in and of it itself like a good commitment already. So yeah, I definitely think it is a great thing, but definitely use the time clarification block to kind of talk more about it and add a little bit more validity to the activity you're inputting. Yeah, no problem. Mm, are there any more questions?
There are no other questions. I think will be that. And I'm sure if Fiona has posted her email and her Instagram there, so if you have any questions, I'm sure she'll be glad to answer them as well. But thank you everyone for attending today's session. I hope there was some useful information that all of you got, and best of luck with all of your be it your MCAT, Casper applications, everything that comes up in the upcoming year. As I mentioned earlier, we're a group of Canadian medical students who want to help you in your journey to medical school. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on our email or message us at our Instagram, which is med.games.org, and we'll be glad to connect with you to help in any way we can. So thank you so much. And I do believe there's another session tomorrow. I know today's was a little bit of a longer session aimed at pre-meds. There's also another session tomorrow, and I think it's a shorter session that's going to be around 30 minutes to an hour about med applications in particular. So specifically about applying to medical school. So hope to see some of you there if you come tomorrow. If not, good luck, and we hope to connect with you soon on your applications. Awesome. Have a good rest of the weekend, everyone. Bye.